pleasure to say what I'm about to say because I worked with Pete Hegseth for 7 or 8 years at Fox News. This is an act of a war crime, ordering survivors who the law requires be rescued instead to be murdered. There's absolutely no legal basis for it. Everybody along the line who did it, from the Secretary of Defense to the Admiral to the people who actually pulled the trigger, should be prosecuted for a war crime for killing these 2 people.
And who would?
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Friday, December 5th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. 2 main stories we're going to be discussing. An interesting story that I only caught wind of today that I wanted to make sure you didn't miss, that has been something we've been following for quite a long time in a lot of different stories and different parts of technological related infiltration, spyware, relates to NSO and Pegasus. It's a company, the primary company, called Intellexa. And it's tied to a larger kind of suite of spyware entities that are controlled, or at least, well, we'll get into the reality of the Unit 8200 Israeli spyware connections from the owner, CEO. It's like every other one of these we talked about. And how this has just been exposed by Amnesty International, by Haaretz, the leading Israeli newspaper, how this has basically, we'll go through the hows of it, but around the world, smartphones have been potentially infected with this. And that doesn't mean ubiquitously every single phone everywhere, at least not that I can see. But it means that this is something that has gone global and has been for quite a long time. This is just a very obvious example. Even as it was Amnesty discussed it, I think they called it the Rosetta Stone of spyware. And the point being that it really brings together everything that people who have been talking about this and arguing where it's going have been trying to prove and claim for quite a long time. Primarily about Israel, the government, not about anything other than that. The government's actions and how they're doing that. Already claims of racism somehow tied into this, despite it being government actions and surveillance, spyware. And importantly, the overlap with the United States, the Trump administration, the reality that this is something that has been pushed back on by the U.S. for a long time and been sanctioned, but quietly allowed to happen, even in this country. And now with Trump's administration, they're just pulling back and allowing it to happen yet again on the surface, despite being inherently illegal in everything that it's doing, and overlapping that with the discussion of the pager attack, the conversation of phones blowing up in Gaza, the reality of what's been happening, the threats from Netanyahu that I see as threats about, you all have a piece of Israel in your pocket. There's a very clear agenda taking place around this. So we're going to go through that particular story, why it's important and how it connects to, pretty much everything we could discuss. But what I can clearly prove it connects to, we'll discuss today. I'm going to talk a bit about Gaza around that as well. That is important to discuss. And we're also going to talk about Venezuela. Now, it's not just Venezuela that is the focal point, but obviously that's the main kind of discussion around the war state and what's been going on, but it's much larger. Obviously, the continuing genocide in Gaza that the U.S. government, all sides of it, support. We're going to touch on Syria. And if we have time, depending on a few factors, I'm going to get into this as we go forward in other shows anyway, but my plan is to discuss further from there, Somalia, Minnesota, the Sudan, Congo, how all of this ties together in multiple ways, and really just political manipulation around it as Trump uses it against political opponents he doesn't like, when it's a manipulation of the story in whether it's about the blue wall state that they're trying to discuss to try to swing that some other way, even though my opinion about voting and how that plays a little factor in what really happens today, or just using that for outside interest or for another power that wants him to do so. But these things are continuing to escalate. And the Venezuela part, obviously, which is what we'll start with, and the bombing of these boats, as we started with Judge Napolitano. It's confounding where we are, where these things are so patently obvious. That's a crime. What they did the first time was a crime, even if everything they claim was true. I said this right in the beginning. It's sort of like the free speech discussion. We said, well, even illegal immigrants have constitutional rights, and all the screeching partisan patriots who think they're fighting the deep state but actually seem to be destroying this country with their stupidity are rushing out to tell you you're wrong, even though they were wrong, even though they don't understand these things clearly if that's what they're claiming. And the same thing here. We're talking about an illegal action, regardless of if everything they claim was true, and then they continue to do it. And then it continued to be proven that most of what they were claiming wasn't true. Some drugs have been found. The reality of the full picture is that they clearly don't know for sure. And I don't even think it's about drugs. The lie of fentanyl in Venezuela is ridiculous, and they still push it. We'll go over that today. But how that relates to the bigger picture of the multiple Southern Hemisphere actions they're taking and what this really means. But again, just the understanding what these things are, the lies that are being spun in the mainstream alternative media and corporate media is where we're going to start. But as always, I'll give you my opinion about how it connects and what it could develop into. And we're going to start with some important stories to get out of the way, or I shouldn't even say it like that. Very important stories that we're going to continue to follow up on, one being Brook Jackson and Pfizer. But my point is I want to start with them since it's a smaller segment so you can see them before it gets buried in a 4-hour show. But I really want you to see, important, showing you both the fact that, the two-party illusion, but also that Brooke is just holding to her guns. She's right, and she's been proven right, and yet that both left and right are pushing back on this. This shouldn't be surprising, as Trump's leaned in heavily to the COVID-19 mRNA shot direction, despite all of the claims. And we'll talk about Massey and the January 6th development around this story. And I'm going to leave it right there. It's one of the most frustrating things of the conversation today because of how ridiculous this is. And it's just the same old Bondi, Cash Bongino kind of just clumsy mess that pretty clearly was just a response to Massey coming out and acting like they just solved the world by showing you they arrested somebody. It's pretty sad. And other things we'll get into. So let's start today with Brook Jackson. And you guys know I support her immensely just because, what she's doing is right. She's put everything she has on the line to show you the truth about this story. If you don't remember the reality of it summed up quickly, I was the very first platform to interview Brook Jackson about this. There was the written report from the British Medical Journal. The Last American Vagabond was the very first platform to discuss with Brook Jackson. And in fact, I had to coax her into this over months. We talked about this, and she was worried about it. It hadn't happened yet. And we finally agreed to it, and we went through extensively, and I've interviewed her about 4 times since then, I believe. And this story has only gotten more clear. It was clear the first time we talked about it. It was clear when the British Medical Journal broke it down. It was clear the second interview we had when even more evidence came out. And still, here we are where Trump's administration is trying to put this back to bed. So the story was she was working for Ventavia, which was an extension of the Pfizer trials, of the COVID-19 trials, and it was who they had hired. And Brooke had worked as the manager for that and found problems to make it quick. There's a lot we can get into. The result, we went over it in depth in the first interview, what she found, how she cataloged it, how she could prove in their emails that they knew they were breaking the law, but lied about it and tried to cover it up. All verified, literally the documents in front of you. And then she called it out and then basically got removed fired around with the overlap of the FDA within a very short period of time, acting like these were separate situations. And at the end of the day, it all got put to bed. And so she sued basically under the termination, but ultimately a lot of information has come out around that. Now there's so much more to that story, and there's, take the time to go through this. What we're at now is that all of that behind us, where she's been fighting since then to show you how dangerous these COVID shots were. That's one of the main parts, is that if the trials were compromised, if they weren't truly doing them properly, I think we know what that means when we can see the big picture. We all can, if we're being honest. These things kill people. In fact, it's pretty clear that they knew they were going to kill people in some parts of the story, and she was trying to highlight that. So here she is this was when I first saw her discussing this, November 16th, 2025, where she came out and said on November 15th, Pfizer lawsuit update. let me show you really quickly, just so you can see where the evolution of it is. So first interview here, Brook Jackson interview, Pfizer whistleblower exposes cover-up, calling vaccine data into question. Really good interview. And I because of her, I felt like I did a good job in the interview, but I feel like what she brought to the table was profound. This one was this was February 11th. Pfizer reveals concerns with data integrity, vindicating previous claims. So they ultimately ended up revealing that there was data issues and she was verified to be correct, and it still didn't change anything. And this is during Biden at this point. So 2023. Pfizer trial reveals Big Pharma includes FDA and the CDC, seen as too big to fail. So they literally argued that even if it's true, we still can't let this happen. It just got more and more ridiculous. Oh, I'm not sure why this one got included in that. Huh, I got to go back and check that out. Well, interesting. Oh, you know what? I think I might be a Brooke Jackson tag I had in there. I got to check, move that. And so the last one we did was this one called Brooke Jackson interview, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, where she very clearly articulates that Trump is doing the exact same thing. And it's almost more insulting at this point because of how much we know. Also, this one, the DOJ sides with Pfizer and Brooke Jackson lawsuit, Trump's DOJ. And before that, even the point about the, basically, as Robert Barnes has pointed out, that their argument against Brooke Jackson was simply that we simply provided for them the fraud that they ordered, and apparently that upheld in a court of law. I mean, it's confounding. So she comes out and says, update after all of that. Ventavi and Pfizer, it's officially scheduled for an oral argument December 3rd, 2025. So that was 2 days ago. At 9 a.m. in the Fifth Circuit, and it says, this is a public hearing. You can attend in person in New Orleans. It says, doesn't surprise me that a case exposing fraud, the taxpayer-funded data used to authorize Pfizer's products is something the government wants to bury, but it still shocks the hell out of me. So they're basically trying to keep this quiet, right? And it was an appeal that they're trying to shut down. So then it comes to December 4th, the day after they had the appeal was put down. It says, the DOJ represents your agency. You believed in me. And she said, dear Kennedy. So she's basically appealing to Kennedy, who people still hope is going to show you that he is the opposite of what he's been doing, or rather been allowed, you could argue he's involved in doing the opposite of what he promised, or you can argue he's blackmailed and bound by something. I mean, there's plenty of things you can consider, but we have to be honest that the Maha direction that he championed, what he did a monumentally good job of doing before this administration, has not only fallen flat, it's going the opposite direction. Other than a few positive steps, it has gone shockingly far in the direction of self-amplifying shots and fake butter and fake salmon and CRISPR pig meat. Yeah, that's where it's going. It's quite obvious. Or PFAS pesticides. I mean, there's just not what every one of those he's spoken out about, and yet somehow they're happening. So back to the shots, which, by the way, is also happening. Despite all the claims and narratives, as I've shown you 100 times, August 27th, this is the new 2025-2026 COVID-19 mRNA shot. Comirnaty. Wherever the mRNA is in there, which you guys don't probably need me to prove that to you, but there it is. COVID-19 mRNA. This is the new shot. After they came out and said we were removing mRNA, they gave the new COVID shot being given to people. They also leaned into self-amplifying shots very publicly. Or I shouldn't say it like that, in documents, but lied about it publicly. But on the surface of the story and documentation, they're leaning heavily into self-amplifying mRNA COVID-19 shots. In case you want to watch that show, I'll include that. So she says, dear Kennedy, the DOJ represents your agency. You believe in me and in the lawsuit I brought against Pfizer so strongly that you made sure I had the help. This is before he was involved. And it says, and the right attorney to fight it. You stepped in because you knew the truth mattered. How can you stay silent now when the appeals court can rule any day and DOJ is actively undermining everything you once supported? How do you go from championing this case to disappearing when it matters most? I need you back. I mean, I think we all know what's happening here. The Trump DOJ, the Trump government doesn't want this to happen. Obviously, they're leaning into mRNA shots. So this is problematic. And so either he's being quiet because he's on their team, or he's not allowed to speak, or he's not capable of speaking. You can only choose so many things. Oh, and here it is. Trump admin leans into self-amplifying shots. I'll include this for you so you can check that show. It's worth watching the show. And just for one example, Arcturus, COVID-19 vaccine, self-amplifying shot is one they're currently working on, which he specifically, self-amplifying, Kennedy specifically highlights this company as one they're going to allow to continue making self-amplifying mRNA shots. Check it out for yourself. I know there's a lot of yelling people out there that claim falsehoods, but this is easy to prove. Okay, December 5th. Before his confirmation, Kennedy helped me secure legal counsel because he believed the clinical trial fraud allegations needed to be pursued. Now DOJ is trying to dismiss that same case in his name. He's their client. So which is it? Did Mr. Kennedy change his position, or is someone overriding him? It's clear to see, guys. Add Bondi and her ties to Pfizer to the equation. We need answers, folks. The public deserves the real investigation into how this happened and who is calling the shots. Guys, look, if it's not happening now, who's coming to save the day? See, the problem is anybody ever pretended or even hoped, or I shouldn't say it like that, even believed for a second, hope all day long, but don't allow that to convince you in the moment that you should not do what you would normally do if it wasn't for the hope. The point being, these are the ones we were told we're going to come save the day. We're Maha and MAGA, and we're going to fight back the deep state and to get rid of the shots and go after Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab. Well, exactly the opposite's happening. And now the people who we were told were going to save us from this are the ones that are hiding or pulling the punches. So you either need to realize that these people are compromised or lied to you. I guess that's the only we have to realize that. Overall, my point, where my mind was going, is just that we can't keep going forward like this is some new politician's going to come in and save it. Every single time it goes this way. I had hope, like we all should, that he might do that, but every moment I was checking and holding his feet to the fire. And the moment I felt something wrong, I said, whoop, there's a problem right there. I still hope I'm wrong, but there it is. That's the only way we can engage with this, guys. So here's an article that came out yesterday. DOJ tries to shut down Pfizer clinical trial whistleblower after FDA admits COVID vax killed kids. So right after we get a leaked document that says that COVID-19 killed, like 10 kids, which is absolutely insulting if you believe that's what happened. I mean, that is, I argue, a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. That's trying to, a steam valve. Let's go, yeah, kill some kids. We lied about it our entire time. We shouted you down for suggesting it could, even though the numbers have shown that the entire time, and now we're admitting a tiny fraction. Well, we know that, guys. We don't need them to say it killed 10 kids. Well, the reality is that it killed a lot of people, and that's been self-evident for a long time. In any case, the government lawyer ignores leaked memo from FDA vaccine chief as he tries to convince appeals court to block Brooke Jackson from refiling her case. Think about how crazy that is. Donald Trump's administration is trying to convince them to block Brooke Jackson's case. But yeah, we're winning, guys. Maha. There's just so much you can take. Call it out. And this is the most recent. If you'd like to watch it, meet the old new boss, same as the old boss. That sure as hell is accurate. Let me share that again. When was this one? This one was in 2025. So, ask yourself, this is just the focal point. There could be so many factors involved, right? But just the general point of the COVID-19 agenda, the general point. How many things has he done? How many things has he investigated? We're told that one of the largest frauds or genocides or both or all the different things we have it's insane to think about what to the children, the time they lost, the education, the life, the illnesses, the waterfall of death and suffering and consequences. And no one's been investigated? Not a single part of the entire agenda. It's just like it didn't happen. We're just moving forward. Look, war with Venezuela, more support for Israel. What about that huge thing that happened to us? What about all the other arrests? You know where the answer is here, guys. What about Pelosi? What about Klaus Schwab? What about James Comey and Letitia? Yeah, we hear a lot of talk, but what I tell you, James Comey's already been dismissed. I didn't want that to be the case. Now Letitia's got some new thing coming out, another claim. We have to start being honest about this. And if he has not even done one thing around one of the most obvious criminal acts I've ever seen in my life, let's be clear, it's probably not going to happen. I hope it does. But then we have things like the fluoride trial that they're already shutting down. We have things like the Second Amendment conversation that I'm going to focus on in the next show, but really just to go over the Prospera points that I want to add to that. But Derek broke that down. Trump is, as according to the Gun Owners of America, Gun Owners Foundation, and many of the most influential gun rights groups are saying this is the most anti-Second Amendment administration, or at least the documents they put forward around this, the act. It was I'm blanking off the top of my head. It was the tax around something that the NRA wanted to go away, and they ultimately removed the tax, but then used the bill to explode what they could do around guns. And they're all going, this is a bait and switch. This administration is lying to us. That's from the hardcore Second Amendment Trump, and they were Trump supporters. It's just, you can't be dishonest about this anymore. Fluoride, any of it, guys, they're going in the opposite direction. So keeping that in mind, let's talk about another example of something that this administration seems to be, whether it's individual actions or from the top down, it doesn't matter. There's something going on. And you know my opinions about that, but I just want you to start asking these questions. So the January 6th conversation. Massey came out about this, and we covered it right when he talked about it because it was interesting. He came out and showed you some pretty powerful stuff, suggesting that there was somebody connected to the government that was likely involved. That's where the evidence pointed, and argued it was clearly not a single person. That's what the evidence showed. And nobody said a word. Cash, they just quiet, crickets. And I was like, well, I'm not expecting them to just brush in, but there wasn't even a comment about it. Kash Patel will rush out and point to something he found that day and blow up an investigation to make you think he's doing everything. And he won't even comment about this because it was pretty clear that the evidence was showing something that was being covered up by all of them, left and right. That's the whole point. So what's funny to me is this account, Shadow of Ezra, posted this clip of Bondi and the rest coming out and making their big explanation. You'll laugh about this when we talk about it. And then Night Watch Nate said, basically came out and go, hooray, Bondi and Trump are saving us from this bad thing. Like just all positive, basically. Look at them. They broke it down, right? And if you listen to it, it's exactly what Massey said it wasn't. Lone person, Antifa anarchist. We got him. We solved it, but yet they've only arrested somebody. So not even these people at the head of these departments are somehow aware that that's only arrest. He hasn't gone to trial. He hasn't been found guilty. So how can you say we did it? It's over. We did. They do it every time. They bring somebody in for an arrest and they do this. They display. It's the equivalent of mission accomplished for George Bush when they've arrested somebody. I mean, even if he's guilty, the case could still fall apart. They act like this every time. It's because they want you to pretend it's over, or they're just shockingly incompetent. Probably both. But he says BS. Massey, thank Massey for the push on this issue. Now they're most likely found a patsy to put the blame on. And what's funny is this guy deleted it pretty quickly because I think, one, likely he recognized that seems to be the case. And secondarily, that it was pretty much like praise the Trump administration for finally dealing with this. And it just looked bad. So he posted this. Brian Cole has been identified. Brian Cole, who I'm not familiar with. In the case of what Massey was first talking about, that doesn't seem to line up with his information, has been identified as the pipe bomber, according to this DOJ and this administration, which has been pretty shockingly dishonest, more than even usual. An anarchist, which is just ridiculous to me. You have to understand that this is the idea that they misrepresent this as chaotic or terrorism. It's not. It just simply means a structure of society that does not have a place for government rulers. There's rules. There's societal rules. There's just no centralized government rulers over your life. As the common statement, rule but no rulers. But they use this to try to make this the case. One, I always say, because it's the only ideology that has no place for them, but also because it's about trying to create the overlap to what they say they're fighting, which is the left wing. The term they've been using is the left wing, anarchist, terrorist, Antifa. Okay. He's from Virginia, they say, who's now exactly 33 years old at the time. Okay. Always 33. Everyone wants to point that out. It's, to me, why does that even mean anything in this conversation? Okay. Possibly you can argue that there's some deeper Masonic connection, which is obviously possible, whatever you think that larger means. But why is it in this case? What are you thinking that Bondi pointed to it to like nod to the Masons? And what would that mean if it was even true? I'm not saying ignore it. Trust me. I've done major discussions about this. There's meaning to this, but I just find it funny when it comes out like this. It just, consider that we're just being laughed at when they do things like that. But it says his arrest comes just 1 month before the 5th anniversary. Okay. And all you get is a video of this person that you can't identify, which, by the way, they already showed some of these videos from a different angle. So I don't know why this one is somehow verifies that this is the person. But here's Town Hall. Bondi says the DC pipe bomber, Brian Cole, has been charged with this thing. So what's funny is they're saying use of an explosive device. DC pipe bomber. Even Town Hall. Like, what are you talking about? You mean the alleged bomber that they've arrested and charged with the potential? I mean, we're dealing with a bunch of children right now. People in the middle of this mainstream alternative government. People in like the leading positions in this country are some of the dumbest, most broad, clumsy, disconnected people I've seen in these positions in my entire life. I think it's because we're being broken down by something from the outside. You guys can decide whatever it means. I'm just so embarrassed by this gaggle of idiots that get presented, and they're ridiculous. They're completely subjective. They throw out claims that you prove instantaneously are not even true, and they all stand there like they just saved the world when nothing's even happened yet. Yes, it's clear that I have negative opinions of them, but it's not because of some left-right paradigm thing. These guys are ridiculous. It's so too is Biden and a lot of the idiots they surrounded himself with. But this is just a special kind of ridiculous these days. And I think anybody honest can recognize that. So here's the case. Cold case, she says. Languished for 4 years. But then Cash and Bongino came into play, and boom, it all came together. But here's the interesting thing. If you didn't have any new information, then what are you saying? They just re-looked at it and connected some dots that were already there the entire time? Well, then why didn't that happen? You can piece together how ridiculous this is when they're saying basically that they magically put it together after all this time, which means they are that incompetent even up until right now, or they were not doing anything until Massey made a point to make it a focal point, and then they had to. And now it seems like they're blaming somebody that appears to not even be the case, as even Massey is pointing out. Here's the clip.
Jr. was arrested and charged with placing the pipe bombs at the RNC and the DNC on January 5th, 2021. He has been charged with violating 18 U.S.C. 844, which is use of an explosive device. This investigation is ongoing.
I mean, ask yourself, why would they all come out like this for an investigation that hasn't concluded, for someone who's been arrested, who has been charged, and it has yet to flesh out? Because they want to, they're desperate for a win right now. And they all want to gather together. Cash is looking as tall as possible. We're the winners. We're successful. It screams incompetence to me. I've been saying it for a long time, and I think it's being shown to be correct every day.
As we speak, search warrants are being executed, and there could be more charges to come. I'm going to let our U.S. attorney discuss that shortly. This was the work of multiple agencies working together. This morning's operation was carried out safely and successfully. We know that there are so many issues when you're issuing search warrants. Dangerous things can happen, and this was carried out safely and securely.
Oh, there's so many issues? Oh, excuse me, when you issue warrants. I'm sorry, I'm reading and clumsily. These people are, they're LARPing, guys. I mean, even what's it, Piero, she's been doing this a long time, but she looks like a cartoon. These people, and it's not only one side of the paradigm. It's these people at the top of this ridiculous game that they're playing, and they just lose themselves to it. That's what I think. I've been seeing this for a long time. They just act very cartoonish, very bombastic, very one-sided, and just scream narratives with nothing to back them up. It's just what we see every day.
Securely, thanks to all of the people standing around me. They have worked tirelessly on this. Today's arrest happened because the Trump administration has made this case a priority. The total lack of movement on this case in our nation's capital undermined the public trust of our enforcement agencies. This cold case languished for 4 years until Director Patel and Deputy Director Bongino came to the FBI.
Okay, so let's just say it's certainly possible. Maybe they did. Maybe there was a case that the Biden administration was covering up, which I think is going on, and they're somehow going to solve it. If they do, and they get the guy arrested, he goes to jail, and it all turns out to be good, then yes, then good job. But here's what I think is interesting, is that clearly, as we're going to do next with Massey, the evidence does not support what they're saying. So it feels like a patsy situation. But on top of that, that it's pretty clear that this is a double, the left, as you know, I think, but I think the evidence continues to back this up, even in this case. This is a whole of government thing, guys. It's not a left-right thing. And so when you look at it like that, this becomes, it's insulting to our intelligence to act like it's Biden versus Trump and then one side versus the other. And there is elements of that. But at the true governance, in my opinion, and I think the evidence backs up as far back as you want to look, it's about one larger agenda. And so this is, I argue, something that they did not want to come to pass. Remember, bombs at the DNC and the RNC, right? This is a larger game that was being played, and that ultimately this was something that was no longer useful. They don't want to flesh this out. That's the way I read this. And Massey made it a problem for them. And then all of a sudden, surprise, surprise, we just happen to piece it together right after Massey makes this hard for us. And not even mentioning that, it seems sad to me. But overall, we'll find out when this concludes. How much you want to bet, just my gut feeling that this will not go anywhere, that this case will probably fall apart in some way, and that's like everything else they're doing. I hope not. But I mean, assuming this person's even guilty, well, let's finish this and we'll get to what Massey has to say.
The FBI, along with U.S. Attorney Piero and all of our prosecutors, have worked tirelessly for months, sifting through evidence that had been sitting at the FBI with the Biden administration for 4 long years.
Right. Well, okay. Well, then, I mean, certainly possible that's exactly what happened, right? I mean, seriously, but why wouldn't that been brought up? Like if everything, and also let's realize all the 7,500 other things they told you they were going to go after Biden for that haven't happened and no one's gone to jail. So ultimately now, I would argue this would have been brought up early. If that was the case and you opened it up and you went, wow, this is all the evidence. It's right there. There's the guy. And you don't do anything. It's been a year. I mean, or let's just even think of the time frame. Why would it take this long to piece this together if there was nothing new? I mean, maybe it'll come out. Maybe they tell us it was locked in some secret case they had to find the key for. Who knows what kind of narrative they'll make up. My point is that at the end of the day, this is based on something that feels patched together in response to Massey. And what she's even reciting doesn't really even line up with what's been happening or what they, as a team of the administration, what they typically have done so far. So just think about what they've done and how they responded in other circumstances and apply this to that and just recognize how out of character it feels with what they've done before. But that's just my opinion. So here is the next part. Diligent Denzian, and this is just an extension of the same conversation. AG Pam Bondi says there were no new leads that led to the arrest of the pipe bomber. And he goes, just good, or she goes, just good, diligent police work and prosecutorial work. So he adds valid point. Says so they could have arrested them at any time, but wanted you to believe that it was a deranged leftist for a while, right? Even though, again, RNC, DNC just doesn't add up really when you think about it. This guy says it's essentially a de facto admission that the entire FBI is maliciously incompetent or corrupt, which I've been saying my entire life because I think it's pretty easily proven. The FBI has been an anti-American institution from the moment it was created. I've talked about it plenty of times in the past, including setting up Americans for actions that they weren't responsible for. But it says, and that doesn't mean every single individual, by the way, but as an institution. In a case where the sitting vice president's life, Kamala, at the time, was allegedly in danger. If we take everything they're saying here at face value, they're admitting that they would allow that to happen and then sit on the evidence for multiple years without doing anything about it. Denzian says, I believe they use incompetence as cover, leaving only one explanation per outcomes. I say that often, right? They'd rather be seen as incompetent than criminal, always, if they're given a choice. So here's this clip.
Long years. Let me be clear. There was no new tip. There was no new witness. Just good, diligent police work and prosecutorial work.
Now, why would you say that? Like, if you know there's this weird time gap where everyone's going to go, well, then why didn't you do anything this entire time? Are you going to pretend that it took a year for you to go through dead file that these agents who are in the FBI are already very versed on? Or are you just saying only cash and damn, they went in their basement and did it by themselves? Like, it just doesn't make much sense. So you could have just been like, we got a new tip. They never reveal what those things are. That just feels like a clumsy response because they want so desperately for you to think they're so good at their jobs that they use a narrative that actually exposes part of their lie. Sounds like what they've done so far.
Working as a team along with ATF, Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police Department, and of course, the FBI. We are working every day to restore the public's trust. We hope that today is a significant step towards that progress. We'll share more information when we can and when it unfolds. I cannot stress enough how hard Director Patel and Deputy Director Bongino have worked for months.
So, just why do you even need to say that? Like, doesn't that, it just screams that they did a really, really good job. I want to stress that those two they worked hard, guys. It's like we're dealing with a bunch of sixth graders. You don't need to be praised for doing your job. It's only because everybody everywhere is like, those people are so far out of their depth, it's embarrassing that you need to keep stressing it. Doth protest too much.
To make our nation's capital safer and to make our country safer. I'd like to introduce now Director Patel.
Thank you, General. When you attack American citizens,
They call her general. I know that's just typically not the way you would refer to that position. She's not a general, right? It's attorney. It's interesting to me. Listen.
Attack America. Thank you, General.
That's weird. It's kind of weird. It's like Bondi calling him president instead of Mr. President. It's weird. It's not correct. Thank you, President.
Attack American citizens. When you attack our institutions of legislation, when you attack our nation's capital, you attack the very being of our way of life.
Oh, you're so eloquent. Just Come out and tell us what's going on. That's the same point, guys. Why we don't need your grandiose explanation about the ethos of where we are in the world. Just here's what happened. Here's how we did it, which is what we've gotten in the past. These guys are LARPing.
And this FBI and this Department of Justice stand here to tell you that we will always refute it and combat it. We will provide the safest country.
Oh, you're so great at your job. Can't you tell? He's just so passionate. Now get to the point. It's not, it's funny. People always act like this is about some kind of a partisan thing. It's just not. These people are embarrassing to anybody who believes this country as an entity, not the government, is better than what it's doing right now. It's just sad to me. Now here, Thomas Massie comes into play, and this is what he put out on the 4th. He posted this on the 5th, but the 4th is from the comment that he made. So he put this out before this statement. Okay. So here's what he had to say before he even heard what their announcement was the following day. And it's pretty important. And I wonder if they heard this before that they came out and basically said it's a lone guy, Antifa, lefty anarchist guy. Here's what Massie said before they said that.
Somewhat of a distraction from what you all should be reporting on. You should be reporting on the lack of diligence for the last 5 years at the FBI on this investigation.
5 years. Let's be clear about that. So he's implicating both administrations. But yeah, obviously Biden, that's the bulk of the time frame, right? That's why if you're aware of the whole of government picture that at least I believe we're dealing with, it makes it much more easy to understand. As usual, with anything else we're dealing with, don't assume that, but just consider it. Take a step back and look at it as all one thing, and it all of a sudden seems really clear, at least to me.
And also a lot of the leads that they had that they let go cold and that they have ignored. And the improbable coincidence of the Capitol Police counter surveillance team that went to 2 pipe bomb locations within 15 minutes of getting out of their car that the pipe bomber had visited the night before. Chad, have you seen any press release from the FBI?
They're going to have a press conference this afternoon.
Okay, great. That's when it would be appropriate to comment.
Okay. But you don't know, but what you heard so far, you don't know if that syncs up with what they're going to say this afternoon.
What I know comes from 2 different whistleblowers.
So it sounds like you're a little suspect of what they might present.
I am a suspect if it doesn't incorporate other facts that I know about. So we'll see. If it's like a single person acting singly without coordination among other people, I am very suspect.
And that's exactly what they just said, just in case that's not clear.
Yeah.
And then, sir, just to any update from the Department of Justice on a schedule for the release of the files after your bill passed?
Well, they have until December 19th, which is now 15 days away. And it's a Herculean task. They have to put that stuff online. They have to redact it. They have to redact any child sexual abuse material. They have to redact the victims' names. And they have to put it in a searchable format online for the public by December 19th, or else they are violating the law. So I hope they're going to be working overtime over the next 15 days getting that done.
But to be clear, you haven't gotten any updates from the department?
No, and we have asked for a very specific update. Attorney General Bondi said that they're opening a new investigation in light of new information. And in my role on the Judiciary Committee, which has oversight over the DOJ and FBI, I have asked for a meeting where they will tell us what that new information is that they discovered that would justify reopening the Epstein investigation.
Can I ask you a couple other questions here? You hear a lot of chatter now about them trying to do something on healthcare in the next couple of weeks. You know how that is the devil to Republicans.
There's some other interesting things he talks about. In case you heard the smaller part there afterward, he talks about the Epstein files. I figured I'd let it play because he discusses the time, the 19th, and the redactions that we all knew were going to come, which, I mean, look, let's be honest about this. If there was child sexual material, obviously they wouldn't be able to release that. But what it does is it opens this window for them to include things that we will never know they were hiding from us, including Massie, if we're going to be just objectively honest about this. My gut would probably at this moment tell me that's not what's happening. I think he's been pretty consistently standing by his principles, but you know what I'm always saying? We need to be extra critical and not pretending or assuming, but just being critical of especially the people that are standing, taking the right path. Like I would imagine they would want, like I would want if I was up there doing it. I want you to be more critical than ever so it stands out against all the people out there completely lying to you. My point, though, is that we're seriously at a reality here where the information is going to come out redacted. And then it's going to be disputed, which is inevitable. And that's not even some kind of a manipulative thing. It's just, why would we ever take at face value what they're showing us as the full picture? But that's not going to be the real conversation. Just to quickly comment on this, what we're going to get to here ultimately is a situation where, you've got information that's on, in succession after the ones that have come up before. And we can compare the new information. And if there's really nothing that changes the story, then this is a lie, right? I mean, if they release a bunch of nonsensical information that really changes nothing, then I'm going to argue that they were hiding something, because we know that there's more to the story, or this would not be the way this went down. We'll touch more on the Epstein conversation as it goes forward. Now, there's one more clip from Massey. And he just simply said his comments yesterday. So then he comes out and he posts this on today, the 5th. He said, and this is Massey from January 2nd, posting saying, read my report to bring transparency to the facts around the mystery of the pipe bomber. So he's been calling this out since January. And they haven't this is the first I've even seen Cash comment on this. And I could have missed something, but I was looking for that. So he says, in case you missed it, in January, Loudermilk and I released our joint report on the implausibility of the FBI's inability to identify anyone responsible. I'll play a clip in a second. Meaning that the evidence that they have access to, it's pretty clear that there's something here that they have neither left or right. That it wouldn't take a year for the Trump administration to go after this. For the January 6 pipe bombs, he says, I still believe multiple people were involved in this plot and subsequent cover-up. This is going to be a thorn in their side. This is why they hate Massey. And I'm glad, because I think he's doing excellent work right now. So here he put out, and this is on the 4th, 3 things I'll never believe about the January 5-6 pipe bomb story. The bomber was not a lone wolf, or he said what he won't believe. So the bomber was a lone wolf. He won't believe that. He won't believe the FBI was this incompetent for 4 years on a case this consequential, and he won't believe perpetrators were pro-Trump. Which, by the way, 2 of those, well, you could say 5 years, that would include all of them, but the lone wolf and the pro-Trump, this is what they're trying to argue. Or actually, well, he says, wait, the double negative is confusing me. Wait, he says he'll never believe, but it has a not symbol. That's confusing. So they're not pro-Trump. Anyway, I would argue my perspective is, in the case that's confusing the way he wrote that, is that they're trying to argue it's a lefty. And so I would argue that they're trying to make it that the case, then I'm not sure if he means that they weren't pro-Trump or they were. Either way, you can decide what he means by that. I think the lone wolf is the main part of this. Whether they try to frame it as somebody political, I think is always the case. So before we go to the next segment, I just really think it's important, I'll play this clip, to consider how this is being used, especially if it doesn't amount to anything. And we're going to keep track on the ones like I've been touching on, the shooting at the FBI in Dallas, the ICE location, the Halloween terror plot. I guess we're just stop talking about that. I mean, this case is ongoing. We'll let you know when I think nothing ultimately happens. But I think that's James Comey. I think there's something to this right now, and I think this is just throwing everything at the wall and just hope you stop paying attention. So moving on to the next story. Oh, sorry, I almost forgot. The last clip is Massey's discussion and the 3 points he was making.
Well, again, I don't want to speculate about specific individuals. I will.
For the podcast, this is 7/12/2023.
Tell you that we have done thousands of interviews, reviewed something like 40,000 video files, of which this is one. Assessed 500 something tips.
Have you interviewed that
the
person?
Devices. We have conducted all logical investigative steps and interviewed all logical individuals at this
Then
point.
it's 900 days. You need to tell us what you found, because we're finding stuff you haven't released into the public.
Right. So the point is that all the way back then, under Biden's administration, they had information. It never happened. So they investigated, they interviewed, and Massey was same with the Epstein point. He has access to some information that shows you that, well, here's information that you have access that you never released. Why would that be? And it kept happening, and here we are. Same thing with this entire time up until right now. And as of right now, the Trump administration is releasing a case or a claim of a charge that completely disconnects from what Massey says the evidence shows. Now, as always, guys, this shows you something that the government doesn't want us to see, like the way they deal with the Epstein file. That's my opinion on it. It's clear that both sides didn't want the Epstein files to come out. It's clear that both sides have been trying to keep this under wraps. I think it probably, you want my one of my potential thoughts on this is that Israel had something to do with it, or something that some other element they work with that they weren't involved with, let's say, or some other overlap. Because let's not forget, January 6th, we had the Azov movement present yelling things in Russian. Israel's directly connected with that agenda, like directly, one of the key elements. And so that tells me that there was something else going on there, as well as the fact that the left-right divide in this country is clearly benefiting Israel's agenda. So you have to consider, whoever it may be, that this might have been something that happened that they don't want us ever finding out. And here we are with another lefty anarchist. Well, we'll find out. So on that note and the overlap of Israel, Robert put out a really great article, 3 parts, a series. But the article is this last one: Trump implements Israel's anti-Muslim free speech crackdown agenda. I love this picture that I threw together with, Netanyahu glad-handing with Trump and Biden, and standing behind, the most recent with the speaker, and, basically just every part of the U.S. government is bowing to Netanyahu, which is very obvious to anybody being real with themselves. And this is the title for the series, is the Israel lobbies anti-Muslim agenda and criminalization of free speech. See, this is the 3 parts. I really recommend you check this out, because it started with Robert just kind of theorizing about where it was going to go. It was sort of on the wall. It was happening, but it hadn't actually, they hadn't designated Muslim Brotherhood yet, and so on. And so he wrote about where this was going. And then he was very quickly proven to be correct, and discussed how that was happening, and then followed up with the most recent additions. And I'll just read you a couple quick parts from this. Or is it, it's right here. So there's Donald Trump is implementing an Israel lobby plot to eliminate nonprofits critical of Israel. Now, this is not even getting into what you think about the Muslim Brotherhood. There's a whole, I think Robert may even do a deeper follow-up on that in general. There's discussions to have about it, like in any of these groups. But the point is about how they're using it. So like the Holy Land Foundation discussion in the past. It's a group that was with basically Israel intelligence told the U.S. they used that without evidence or rather investigation, and accused them of terrorism, designated them as such, never went any further. The case actually fell apart, according to Human Rights Watch. There was no evidence, but nonetheless, the designation stayed. And then they spun out and went after all these U.S. groups that were supporting Palestine. It's the same situation. And immediately after they designated Muslim Brotherhood, they just went right to going after students for justice in Palestine, and other groups that were simply American groups, many of them Jewish organizations that were simply trying to fight to give Palestinian freedom. And that's what this is going to be. And then expand from there however Trump wants to use it, or Israel for that matter. So the eliminate nonprofits as such, critical of Israel, and to crack down on the First Amendment rights of his citizens under the guise of targeting the Muslim Brotherhood organizations. This insidious conspiracy is part of a carefully calibrated plot to silence all dissent, and is being carried out using the same justifications used against the so-called war on terror. And it's at a time when Israel, I'm adding this, is clearly collapsing in its support, has been the entire time since October 7th forward, as I've been telling you, but it's becoming vivid lately, where Republicans are collapsing in their support for Israel. Obviously, reasons why. They're just not ridiculous and genocide supporting. They finally see it and they go, well, that's too much. And that's collapsing. And so that's why we see the Barry Weiss, Larry Ellison absorbing all of the media and trying to shove that down your throat. $7,000 payments, and Cam Hibby, all these different people are out there trying to scream at you what nobody believes. And some level, long enough, it probably will work. It's what they've done in the past. So we can't let it happen. But this, wherever I was going with that, I had another thought in there I just lost. But overall, the bottom line is this is about creating those justifications. And he elaborates in these last 4 paragraphs. Targeting the Muslim Brotherhood has 2 distinct purposes. The first is an anti-Muslim fear-mongering campaign designed to convince American conservatives that the 1%, and it is 1%, and remember that because when we get to the Somalia point, if we do today, depending on time, it's the same conversation. It's 1.1% of the Minnesota population. It's just, it's insane what they're doing right now. That they're trying to convince conservatives, American conservatives, that 1% of the U.S. population who are Muslims, that's just religious, by the way. It doesn't necessarily mean they're brown versus white. And it says that those Muslims pose an existential threat, and that through the Muslim Brotherhood, they are part of a grand Islamic crusade style conspiracy, which of course we should consider as possible. Of course we should, but the evidence matters. And while you're staring down the throat of a very obvious agenda coming from a different power and arguing that's the problem, when that's the power, when the Israeli element we're talking about has been trying to thrust Americans into that and at that its entire existence, while funding Hamas and funding elements of Islam that they want you to think they're fighting. This is a construct, guys. We are being played. It's not to say that there's not Muslims that are extreme. It just is obvious that Israel has been creating this, and this is what it comes down to. It says this narrative diverts attention away from Israel and redirects it toward all of Tel Aviv's enemies. It is a propaganda campaign built on outright lies, distortions, and fear-mongering. The second purpose, and the direct result of this manufactured hatred of Muslims, is that the Trump administration can continue pursuing the Heritage Foundation think tank's blueprint for silencing criticism of Israel, as laid out in the Project Esther document published on October 7, 2024. And he goes over all of this in the three-part series. And it says Trump has treated this agenda as a clear priority since his first week in office. If the Trump White House gets away with carrying out this planned crackdown, one that both Israel and the Israel lobby in the U.S. are encouraging, it will, and this is on in addition to the designation of the Muslim Brotherhood, it will represent one of the greatest attacks on American free speech rights in history. Not only will it inevitably instill fear in Muslims and Islamic organizations, but also in non-Muslim organizations and individuals advocating on behalf of Palestinians. It is almost certain that this chilling effect will be the desired outcome, as students and academics at Ivy League universities have already been effectively silenced through intimidation following last year's encampment movement. To be clear, he finishes, this agenda has little to do with Muslim Brotherhood itself. Rather, it is about dismantling pro-Palestinian movements and imposing total censorship on those critical of the Israeli government. We're all watching this, guys. As you read this article, the agenda continues to unfold with almost no popular opposition because most Americans remain unaware of what's happening. Some conservatives are even supporting it under the mistaken belief that they're fighting to protect their freedoms from a largely illusory Muslim threat. And it goes over quite a lot that's worth your time in this. But keeping this in mind and understanding where this is going and how it's being used to suppress you. And that's not to say, like I said, that it's one versus the other. Extremism, wherever it resides, should be called out. But right now, what they're trying to convince you of is that extremism is justified when they do it, and it's only ever existing and something we should stop when we claim it's over there, but they're waving a flag, but that's what it means, wink, wink. My point, though, is that there are extremists. And whether it's just what organically coming about in places because of what they grew up with, whatever, Muslims, Jewish people, Americans, Christians. But what we also have to understand is that is manufactured as well. We talked about Mohammed bin Salman, the leader of Saudi Arabia, who himself is a dictator, extremist, and openly tells you, check this out. I bet you I can get this to come up. Jeez, so crazy. This is an article back from, I think Whitney wrote this. Yeah, 2018. Mohammed bin Salman wants people in Yemen to, quote, shiver for generations when they hear Saudi Arabia vows to continue targeting children. That's not a joke. That you can look it up for yourself. This is an open statement. When they asked about it's sort of like Netanyahu saying, no, it's a state for the Jews alone. And then everyone telling you, no, they're equal over there. It's insane levels of dishonesty. This is ridiculous. This is the people that your government works with while telling you they're working and fighting dictatorships and evil stuff. So for an entire career, I've been calling this out. So clearly, this is something that they've been doing their entire career, or rather existence. And they work with these people. They fund these people and act like what they're fighting is somehow the evil elements out there. And they're just trying to manufacture this and aim at the things they claim are happening. Historically, you can see Israel creating these things. As we said with the Mohammed bin Salman, the idea of the people they work with, or even the groups that they fund. And the point was what Mohammed bin Salman said publicly was that the people that lead these groups, the groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, are groups that espouse their Wahhabist ideology, comes from Saudi Arabia, are people that weren't even truly religious, that they're assets, ISIS, Mossad, CIA, and ultimately trick the rest of the people underneath them to adopt the ideology. And this is not all encompassing, but these are statements from people involved. We have been played our entire lives, guys. And so going into the next segment about Israel, so you're going to get some updates on what they're dealing with, or what they're doing, rather. First, here's a clip from Decentered News from Laura Loomer, who is in the State Department, because that's what a cartoon we're living in right now. And she's in there asking about the Muslim Brotherhood, and the answer she gets probably doesn't even matter anymore. So she's over here screaming about how Muslims are bad no matter what, shouldn't be in Congress. Qatar is the worst thing in the world, even though Israel's working with them to do the same thing, and they don't care about that, though. On top of the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood has been designated, therefore they can't, Qatar's connected, therefore Trump shouldn't work with Qatar. right? But they go, no, we're going to do it anyway. How much you want to bet she ends up screeching here and there about it, but doesn't do anything and still supports Trump no matter what, because she's a hypocrite. But on top of that, it's only because Israel wants them to be aiming at only Muslim targets. But then Liam Cosgrove comes in with an interesting overlap that I'll let you hear when he brings it up, which I think is hilarious because it's the exact same point, but it only matters one way, according to people in these positions.
Thanks so much for having me here today. Now that the president has started the process of designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign Islamic terrorist organization, will the Department of War still proceed with selling F-15 fighter jets to Qatar? And how will they be able to train Qatari pilots at their airbase in Idaho if Qatar is included in the designation?
Oh, that's actually a great question. It really is. The only difference is that they're not going to do anything about it. So she's here acting like this is the Trump administration fighting the deep state and he supports Israel and we're against Muslims. Okay. And then they have a meeting with Mamdani, and it's he's going to make New York great again, and he's okay, and we're great. Now we're on the same side, and we're letting Qatar train inside the United States. I mean, you are if you have principles, which she clearly does not, this would be, well, then you guys are the problem. But no. That's not how that will happen. She'll make the statements and make it seem like she's pushing back and make a couple of crybaby points online about how Trump is doing the wrong thing, and then completely support him no matter what, just like Alex Jones and all the rest continue to do, because they're not really being honest with you.
Thank you for the question. We take very seriously our partnerships. And
I'm sorry. The rest of it, the way that she responds, it's just so cookie cutter. It pains me. They picked her obviously because she's comfortable. Like, she does a good job staying calm and comfortable, which is pretty much what you need in this position, because you're lying and being attacked all the time because they're dishonest. But she just gives you blanket platitudes and statements that mean nothing. It doesn't address the question. They always do that, but you're going to get what I mean when you listen to this. It's just, we're fighting for freedom and we're the good guys, and we don't do things like that. And we always fight hard to make sure you guys know we're doing the right thing. What does that have to do with anything? That's like saying, no matter what the question is, we're good. So next question. It isn't you're lying, or you could be. It's just hard to not see how kind of like, I guess, the same kind of conversation. Like, if somebody who was an expert at this or has been trained, to be deceptive for governments would be able to maneuver this in a way that makes you think that they're actually giving information when what they're doing is deceiving you. This is just like, we all know they're lying, so let's just go through the motions, is what it feels like today.
Is included in the designation.
Thank you for the question. We take very seriously our partnerships, and we always do thorough evaluations to make sure that they protect our intelligence, our operational security, and that they serve the best interests of the American people. The U.S. military has a longstanding partnership with Qatar, and we look forward to continuing that partnership at our airbase in Idaho. And I would just point out that for reference, the Mountain Home, Idaho airbase is not just Qataris that train there. There are also Singapore military folks that are there as well. So it is
Israeli, China, whatever. They all just come and go, whoever pays the highest price. But here's the interesting thing about this, right? Okay, so Laura's telling you they're going to designate this group a terrorist organization, right? That's what they're doing. That's what he did. So Qatar is connected to that group. So you're telling me that they don't care that they're working with a terrorist group? Obviously not, guys. They don't care about any of these things. That's what this is showing you. If you're going to they're designating them a terrorist group because they're going to use it like Robert just showed you. They're not going to do anything about it. They're going to Qatar, if this was an issue, which you'll have Liam point out about the overlap here in a second. If this was an issue, well, then Qatar would be implicated. And I'm going to say, well, you either cut ties with that terrorist organization or we can't have, but they don't care. No, we're going to have a great relationship with Qatar. Well, I would just ignore it. They do good things and we vet them properly. Okay, so we'll work with ISIS then. We vet them clearly. We'll vet them really hard, make sure they're not the terrorist guys. If they're terrorists, the claim anyway, most of the people they call terrorists are not. Very easy to prove. The point, though, is that if you're going to say they're terrorists, it just shows you that the undercurrent is just narrative. It's embarrassing. And, if you were Laura, at least what she's projecting all the time, that should be confounding. You should be angry. But she won't. She'll support him. Watch.
Base that we do a lot of foreign military training, and we are thankful for those partnerships, and we'll continue to evaluate all of those to make sure, again, that national security is protected. That is the Secretary's utmost priority.
But given the fact that the Qatari royal family and Qatar itself is the biggest financier, along with Turkey, of course, the financier of the Muslim Brotherhood, would that relationship and partnership be reevaluated since the designation could possibly include Qatar?
I'm not tracking any reevaluation at this time, but again, the Secretary really keeps national security security top of mind, and this administration does as well. So we will always make sure that American assets are protected.
Yeah, top of mind. We got it. Shut up, Laura. We're on it. It's nah, we don't care. You know, it's just this is not, we'll look at it and come back. They're not doing that. This would be discussed if that was the case. This is pretty public. So that's it. And she'll go back to supporting him no matter what. Now, here's the obvious overlap that's worth noting.
If I could follow up on Laura's question, actually, she mentioned that are we reassessing our relationship with Qatar because of funding of the Muslim Brotherhood? It's been widely documented in mainstream Israeli papers that the Israeli government funded Hamas, which we also designate as a terrorist organization. Are we therefore reassessing our relationship with Israel because of this?
That would be a better question for the State Department, as they're the ones who have those foreign diplomatic channels.
Oops. Yeah. So note the difference in the response. Same question. No, we don't have any reevaluating on the table. No comment. It's just perfect. These are people are ridiculous, guys. And an honest person can call this out. It's embarrassing. Clearly there's an issue right there. Clearly there's a contradiction really on both parts of the conversation, but the way they regard one or the other, it's just obvious. And that overarching point is that they funded terrorism in every way you could possibly find. Whether we're talking about ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which we've done an entire focus on, we'll brush over it today, how clearly you can see that they funded, worked with, armed, and continue to help them. On top of the fact that Hamas was funded by Israel, the most radical elements around around the world or the Middle East have been funded, backed, and utilized by U.S. intelligence and Mossad as far back as you want to look. It's one of the most provable things in this conversation. And yet we pretend they're the ones fighting terrorism. No, they've been cultivating it and using it to basically reap what they can, take what they want from whoever they want. So this topic about Gaza and Israel is just important to make the clear what they're actually doing. You know, while this is still the case, here's what Israel was doing in case you were, hadn't been paying attention. So this is just a report from Waleed Shaleed. Is from CNN. CNN did their own report and found that IDF shot starving Palestinians trying to collect flour. Yeah, that shouldn't be shocking to anybody. Whether we're talking, this isn't even about the flour massacre. This is about the ISIS-linked gangs that were pretending to feed them and then would execute them when they came to get flour that was dug into the dirt and they're picking out with their fingers. We've seen endless videos. We've had U.S. veterans come home and tell us what they saw. It's disgusting. Glenn says this is why Israel continues to ban all international media. This is from today. From entering Gaza unless they submit to total control by the IDF. Interestingly, we'll end with this, sort of like exactly what Pentagon's doing with Hegseth and their media that say they're only allowed to report what we tell you, and they go, journalism. Is it okay? Can I say that? How embarrassing. Despite how much the world already knows, he writes, the true extent and depravity of the U.S.-funded atrocities will only be fully documented once that happens. Mish says, how come not a single person saw it and recorded it, though? Well, with all those phones with a yellow band in their account. And he goes, well, there are hundreds of videos, which I posted on I've shown them myself, guys, of the IDF and their American contractors gunning down people waiting in food lines. But since they came from Gazans, you all claim they were Hamas, lies or whatever. But why don't Israel just let international media to freely report? And she goes, where? And he posts a video, more Palestinians killed waiting in food lines. And then you'll notice the crickets. It's just, that's what you get. So execution. Now, in case you forgot about the flour massacre that was roundly disputed, but where we are now, it's worth visiting back and remembering that major example when they brought in a truck full of food and then shot everybody around it twice. Forensic investigation reveals Israel lied to the ICJ, and that's just the first part of the conversation. The flour massacre exposes starvation campaign, February 2024. It was one of the worst things I've ever seen in regard to just how starving people flooding in for food and having them just mow everybody down. This we followed up. The flour massacre setup, false flag attempt exposed. This one was on March 3rd. Israel attacks more aid convoys even after multiple investigations expose the flour massacre was a setup. Proven. Check it out for yourself. This was on the March 5th. Gaza's flour massacre was only the beginning of famine that just started. That was Robert's article. Now, here's a clip that you might want to see. This isn't extremely new. I think it's a couple weeks old. But we're talking about them denying executing people. We'll never do that. Well, here is this woman. I forget her name again. It's, where is it? Tali Gottlieb. We've covered her many times. She was the one that lied about there being no Christians and no churches until she was caught live in the air and just deflected and moved on. They're disgustingly dishonest people. She came out on Israeli media after the ceasefire, right? When they got their hostages back, as we all told you when that happened, that they would then no longer, here we are. There is nothing stopping them from just executing anybody everywhere. What does she say? We have no hostages left. We no longer have to be precise. We can attack without mercy. That's what she literally said on mainstream TV. And of course, they're not. They were never being precise, but now they're being belligerent even more than they were before. And she's openly praising that. She's in the government. Alonzo simply points out what the Israeli Foreign Ministry posted. This was on end of November. When the UN is fixated on Gaza to the point of obsession, the rest of the planet would also appreciate some attention. And they show a phone that shows Sudan, Congo, Haiti, Somalia, Afghanistan, Yemen, all missed calls. Seriously? Despite the fact that people I've touched on every single one of those on this show. But he goes, when your best defense is other people genocide too, think about that. I've been making that point from the beginning. When they go, you weren't talking about Iraq. Well, yeah, we actually were. But your argument is you didn't care when that genocide happened? I mean, my God, that's desperation, if you ask me. Here, Israel Defense Forces comes out on November 29th and says, ceasefire violation. IDF troops identified 2 suspects who crossed the yellow line. Remember the yellow line that they've randomly moved and was a violation in the first place since they weren't allowing people to cross it. And on top of that, just constitutes their encroachment into their territory, like we've been telling you the entire time. And they claim those people trying to cross the line into their own territory where they were allowed to go back because of the ceasefire, and they shot them, that's their violation. And it gets more disgusting when even Twitter, which, by the way, they got removed, which I knew would happen. It's not there anymore, but it was. I saw it myself. The suspects were children aged 11 and 8 years old. And the link to Sky News reporting on it. But of course, since Israel clearly influences, if not controls this platform, they just said, get rid of that, and now it's gone. But it's easy to look up. There's the picture of them. Blakely highlights it, the suspects. It's not a joke, by the way. Now, I'm not asking you to blindly trust me, but I'm telling you, I looked into this myself, and it's the fact. But if you want to look into it, it's right in front of you. The information is down below. And there's many, many overlapping points. But please look into it. Don't ever trust me blindly. Look at the information. The reality is they've been killing children incessantly. Not only did they try to use these 2 children aged 11 and 8 years old as the violation, they executed children in any sense. Like the idea that this is not, like, if these people were adults, this would still be a crime because they were not breaking the law. And in fact, what they did was the violation. But they murdered 2 children and then used them to claim there was a violation. The depravity. It's sinister, guys. Now, drop site news. Netanyahu, this was on the 3rd. Netanyahu, by the way, let's acknowledge that they've been bombing in Gaza and executing people since the second this thing started. I've been reporting it up until the first 4 days. I was like, well, it's not news anymore that they're violating it. It's been happening every single day. But they still pretend it's what they do with Lebanon too. There is supposedly a ceasefire in Lebanon, and they've been bombing in Lebanon constantly, and the media still goes like, ceasefire challenge today. But of course, when they do it, ceasefire violated. It's just insane. This is ridiculous because they've been bombing in Gaza from the very beginning. It says Netanyahu threatens Gaza-wide retaliation after Rafah clash, claims ceasefire violated. Israel's channel, like I said before, it's the same thing that Pompeo and Trump did in Yemen when they allowed Saudi Arabia to just rush in and take territory every time a ceasefire took place, and they claimed the Yemenis violated, which they didn't do. And all the way to this day, you can see that the Houthis have stood up and backed what is right in this conversation. They were lying about them then too. And Saudi Arabia is a connection of the same larger agenda we were talking about our entire career. It says Channel 12 reports Netanyahu has convened an urgent meeting after 5 Israeli soldiers were wounded in Rafah. Netanyahu stated the Hamas terror organization continues to violate the ceasefire. It says in reality, Palestinian fighters are trapped east of the ceasefire line that they set up, by the way, which the not allowing them to pass over this, which they were supposed to be allowed to go back to their territory, is a violation. So they essentially create this border and then say you're on the other side of it, you're dead. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And it says they're trapped and Israel's refusing to let them cross under any of the negotiated terms. Again, that was the point. Israeli forces have been systematically hunting and killing these fighters. At least 42 when the ceasefire began. since then. When these fighters attempted to defend themselves, Israel uses that as a pretext to bomb everybody else and says it's a violation. This just kills me. For context, according to Al Jazeera, Israel's attacked Gaza on 44 of 55 days since the ceasefire began. Many of which they didn't even try to argue there was because something else happened. They just bombed, executed somebody, and just didn't report it because they know the Western media will largely ignore it. So Ryan Grimm says, Trump told Netanyahu to let the fighters in Rafah go. He said that, but Israel doesn't care what Trump says. And it says, because there's the ceasefire, right? That's what happens in a ceasefire. Instead, Netanyahu has insisted on hunting them all down, and now he's angry that some of them shot back. And so, ceasefire, violation. He says this is absolutely spoiled brat behavior. Updates in regard to Lebanon and Gaza. Israel kills Palestinian civilians in Gaza as it bombs Lebanon. But yeah, they're the victim in the situation. Don't forget that. It says Israel carried out airstrikes across Gaza. This was yesterday into today, killing at least 6 people, including children and women, and women, and wounding 16 others as it continues to violate the October 10th U.S. brokered ceasefire. It says the Israeli military attacked 4 towns in southern Lebanon after they announced a second round of civilian talks with Israel will take place on December 19th. Because that's what they do, you know? We have a new ceasefire conversation, bomb everybody, and then they can say something and then we'll claim they violated something. Israel will take, it says the 12-year-old Palestinian boy was shot in the head during an Israeli army raid in West Bank. No, nothing's changed, guys. Now, Dave DeCamp called out Eve Barlow, who has me blocked. She highlighted what Miss Rachel said. Literally, this is what Miss Rachel said. Wanting kids to live isn't anti-Semitic. No matter how you pretend, whatever you pretend the intent there is, the way she responds is comical. And I don't even think she realizes it. It says, this is a blood libel. This is not a joke, guys. This is a very clear Zionist account. It says, it's that simple. If you don't understand why you don't know the first thing about Jew hatred, and she's got 5.3 million views and is getting shockingly ratioed. Now, she's gotten some followers that jumped in there. It was much lower before. But either way, still, she's getting ratioed. Which you know what that means. You're on this platform. Dave says, come on. It's like, this is just ridiculous. What we're doing is, this is insanely stupid. Because it's like saying all lives matter is racist. It's the partisanship causing people to lose their minds. And I said, when Miss Rachel says wanting kids to live isn't the anti-Semitic, this clown response, I think I just highlighted it. Yeah, it's just comical. It really is. Now, I wanted to read through this. It's an article that I thought you should see. Now, this is important to highlight for 2 reasons. Because it's real and it does exist, but also because it's important to see what drives this. Now, there are people that will make this about only Jewish people forever, despite all the evidence. I mean, it's impossible. Like, it's the point I always make. I mean, you could argue that it's the majority. I disagree, but I could be wrong. But the family that lives next door that just had a baby that's Jewish, does that mean they're evil all of a sudden? I mean, it's a dumb way of thinking. You have to argue. And my point is just to make it about all or nothing. If it's not all, then we can't talk like that. And so the reality is clearly a nuanced discussion. The point is that there are Jewish people who are wrapped up in the Zionist mindset, and even the extension of that think that's what that means, who are lost in this conversation. And there's a hugely growing number of people in the world, Jewish and otherwise, who are actively calling out the lie of Zionism, the lie of what they've been doing. And I'm telling you guys, like I was right about COVID, right about the MAGA movement majority, and I think still right about the 2-party illusion breaking down. I see it because of my research. And the reality is the numbers, we see it in the Republican numbers, they've collapsed in Israel support. The Zionism conversation is the central linchpin here. I think Charlie Kirk was aware of that problem, and that's what happened. It wasn't about Israel alone. It was about the Zionism overlap and Netanyahu and his struggle with still wanting to support Israel and recognizing that Zionism was destroying what he believed in this country. Now, I argue they're one and the same, and there are average people in Israel, a large grouping of them, in fact, not the majority, I think, that don't support that, but the government entirely, as far as I can tell, does. So there's no decoupling it in the sense of the government, but I think that's what Charlie was kind of grappling with. My point is that in general, Zionism is being seen. and to understand that that is the driving force behind the extreme racism and every other part of this we're seeing. Now, that's not to say that there's not Jewish people that espouse that because they believe it, or Christians because they believe it. But I don't believe that means all Jewish people or all Christians are one thing. That seems pretty stupid to argue, doesn't it? So when we get into this overlap, reading this article from this is a rabbi who wrote this for the Times of Israel, and he's a famous rabbi. You've heard Moshe Mordecai. In 2022, he wrote this. The title is, "To Dislike Certain Ethnicities is Racist. To See Jews as Equal is Anti-Semitic." Now, I'm of the mind that this is a Zionist-driven mindset. You can come to whatever conclusion you want. I want to make it clear why I'm discussing this. And that this Zionism mindset is what makes people like him act the way he does. While you could point out rabbis all over the world who scream that this is disgusting and that what they're doing right here is antithetical to Judaism. Now, you can disagree with that, but just know that those arguments exist. So as we go through this, this is mind-blowing to me. This was deleted from Times of Israel, and you'll see why. And it is, I mean, it gets worse and worse as you go through it, and it is about supremacy. And I also include this, by the way, just so we can make it clear that this is not something that should be dismissed in any sense, seeing as how the B'Tselem, who is the leading human rights group in Israel, right here, the title from 2021, "A Regime of Jewish Supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea." This is apartheid. Now, I argue even this conversation is really about the Zionism supremacy that drives that. You can come to whatever conclusion you want. Just recognize that I truly believe that that's what this is. Oh, here's the highlighting. Okay. Here's how he starts. Jews are not overprivileged. He says, however, there is a good, and what this kind of keeps doing is it's like, this is racist, but, and it keeps doing that kind of thing. So that Jews are not overprivileged. But, however, there is a good reason not to just call anti-Semitism only a form of racism. So right, the point to start is that anti-Semitism is a special form of racism above all others. And it says, while all peoples are unique, some are more special than others. Now that stood out to me. I'm thinking, where have I heard that before? I'm thinking, like, is this a joke? I remember where I've heard that before. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Animal Farm, George Orwell. Think about how Orwellian that is. To think about this overlap, it just, I only just thought of it the other day and was like, that's what that is. While all peoples are unique, some people are more special than others. It's basically the same sentiment. And that should be ridiculed because it's insane. Now, he goes on. If you haven't read Animal Farm, you really should. It's overlapping with Nazis and Stalin and that whole time frame, but the real point is the, how that the structure changes when suddenly the animals are in charge, and how it starts with equal stuff, but it kind of rapidly ends up in some kind of authoritarian leadership. But while arguing that it's just, you have to read it. It's really well done, and it really relates to where we are today. It goes on to say, he means capital meaning God. He means that he will hold us, as in Jews, to a higher standard. But to make things complicated for starters, when bigots hold Jews to a higher standard, that's, you guessed it, bigotry. Now, I make this point all the time when Netanyahu will come out and say the Jews and Zionism are the same thing. And this is the state of the Jews. And what we do represents Jewish identity. And then you come out and go, well, then did Jews just kill those people? You're racist. It's like, well, I'm not even saying, you just said that. That's what, this is the whole crux of the point. They're trying to convince you by stating it publicly that that's all one and the same. But then if you come out and say, well, then that means that you're claiming the Jewish population is responsible, and then you go, you're telling us the Jews are bad. It's meant to cause that kind of reaction. I'm telling you, this is the Zion. If you understand Herzl and Zionism from the origin, who is an atheist, had written terrible things about Jews in his journal, this is something that was used. It was manufactured. So the reality is they're simply telling you that Jews are held to a higher standard. But if you try to hold them to a higher standard, you're racist. And it says, when we Jews live up to our potential, we are equal to Gentiles who live up to their potential. If the latter could live up to the Jewish standard, they're invited to join us Jews. The supremacy is just riddled through this whole thing. It says, considering one ethnicity, one culture, better or worse than all others is racism, period. Yeah, that's correct. I agree with that. Then it goes on to say, yet Jews are the only nation, not just based on practice, location, or beliefs. Jews are the only people based on an assignment. So we're special or better. But realize they said nation. We're not talking about Jewish people. They're talking about Zionism because there is no nation for Jews. Judaism is a religion. I mean, maybe I should play the clip of that rabbi speaking about Judaism at the end and telling you that very clear point. The lie is to make it about a state. It is a political organization. And so when they talk about a nation, they're talking about the Jewish Zionism, not just Judaism. And it says that means that when one says that Jews are just like everyone else, you're a bigot. I mean, think about that statement. So you're telling us that they're either better or worse. They're not the same. So you're telling us they're better. That's just, I mean, this is driving people to say, well, that's not true. And then they're called a bigot. And then it causes resentment. And it builds into this idea that Jewish people are the problem. And Zionism and the ADL and all the rest feed on that kind of idea. It says you don't need to look down on Jews to be anti-Semitic. Right. You can be completely supportive of them and just not say the right things. And you hate Jews and don't even know it. It's mind-blowing. It says when our parents say that they want to be our friends, this is crazy. That's nice. But we better also respect them as teachers. Totally equalizing them is demeaning them and arrogant of us. When Jews say they want to be everyone's friends and allies, that's nice. But Gentiles better also give them respect as their teachers. Totally equalizing them is demeaning them and arrogant. Meaning that to try to say they're at the equal level with me or you is arrogant because they're clearly at a higher, better level. There's just no, and this is not my opinion, guys. This is exactly how these words read. And it goes on to say, we are not Christians, older brother. Too many older brothers in the Hebrew Bible were passed over by younger siblings. We are their parents. It says being against mixed marriages is racist. Again, correct. Like, you know, I mean, you could argue that in a sense of like, I mean, you could think and feel whatever you want, but the point is that thinking that people shouldn't do anything based on race and having some kind of an argument because of race is simply by definition racist. You can argue that there's examples that would even be seen as bad. And just my point is to recognize that the term simply means that applying things based on race. And so they're saying being against mixed marriages is racist by definition. And it says, but men, and I'll just in case that's not clear, I would argue, as from a personal perspective, that thinking that a black woman can't marry a white or, you know, black-white kind of overlap, thinking that's wrong, I think you're a disgusting person. There's no reason to think that's wrong, but you can think what you want. But it says many Jews marrying, so again, being against it is racist, but many Jews marrying out helps Jews to die out. So again, this is about some kind of a bloodline thing. This is not about Judaism. It's about the idea of arguing that there's some kind of a Jewish bloodline. Now, there's arguments about some kind of Ashkenazi background, but that's not what the government is. At least, I guess, arguing depending on certain things, like Netanyahu actually coming from Poland and so on. But it's simply saying that they marrying other not Jewish helps them die out, which in and of itself is a supremacist mindset to say that we're only supposed to marry within this certain bloodline. It says it also means going along with self-hatred as if anything non-Jewish would give a personal safe passage out of the anti-Semitic danger zone. What? European and Arab Jews marrying each other is enough marrying out already. Clearly. Did you miss what he just said? So Arab Jews are Jews. And you're saying that European Jews marrying Arab Jews is already marrying out? You just let the cat out of the bag in one paragraph. You can't start by saying that we're talking about Jews and not Zionism and then say and that we're all the same and better than, but then Arab Jews aren't the same. And that's marrying out because it's about Zionism. If it's Jews, then it would be, you get the point, guys. It's so transparently obvious. Ask Ethiopian Jews that live in Israel. They're treated like second-class citizens. They're treated like Palestinians. Not saying that they're second-class citizens, but they're all treated like they're less than. Goes on to say, Zionism is to Jews what feminism is to women. Men who like women but not feminists show that they don't like women. What? See, this is just so broken. So you're telling me that if I see a feminist who's espousing ideas that are let's just say extreme, but are maybe just say just, you know, about ideas that I disagree with, does that mean I don't like every woman everywhere? No, that's insane. And on top of that, it's just an ideology, so you can disagree with what it means and still argue that I like people that don't feel that way. It's that see, what they're trying to do is say that feminism is women. And if you don't agree with that, then you don't like women anywhere, because that's the only way they can argue Zionism, right? If you don't agree with Zionism, you hate Jews everywhere. It's not logical, guys. And it says, rather, It's Zionism to Jews is what feminism is to women. Men who like women but not feminism show that they don't like women. Rather, they like being served. Think how far you flip that. As if so you don't like support feminism, therefore you want women serving hand and foot. There's a middle ground in there, guys. And it says Jews and Gentiles who like Jews but not Zionists, here's the crux of the point they're trying to make, show that they like Jews as long as they feel scared all the time so that they can be manipulated and to serve and comfort the Gentile powers to be. Oh my God. You understand why this got deleted. But not when they are independent and proud of themselves. So you could argue that you don't believe a political organization, or let's just even say that Zionism is a state of the Jews. It's not, but let's just even say for sake of conversation, that's what it is. And let's just even say that I'm like, well, I don't think that should exist. You're telling me that therefore the extreme opposite is that I think they should all be scared and hate themselves? How do you even connect those dots? It's the only way they make this make sense is to argue that it's all or nothing. You either support this or you hate everybody. That's not how the world works, but this is what they're breaking it into. Yeah, and just the reverse is, anyway, you get the point. There's so many points to take off these things. Ending, it says, that's why hatred of Jews is the ultimate ungratefulness. Throwing mud on Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Einstein, and Herzl, who, by the way, Einstein was very anti-Zionism. And it says, and therefore, the Holocaust doesn't compare to any other genocide. Armenian included, by the way, which Israel was involved with, of course, though they are horrific. Oh, okay, so your genocide is worse than any other genocide. So when a Jew dies, it's worse than when anybody else dies. There's no misunderstanding this. That is Zionism supremacy. And it says, because anti-Semitism is so unique, and because Jews are kept hostage by the top level of societies, seriously, and blamed for all this, all ills, because this is how they create that support for Zionism, it often ends up uniting all oppressed groups against the Jews, the victims of the oldest hatred. So now you've made yourself the victim of victims, and that all other victims hate you. It's just deranged kind of thinking. And it says, and so you see there is reason not to just regard anti-Semitism as one of the forms of racism. Jews' oppression is too specific. It's special bigotry. My God. I guarantee there are people that will do one of two things, completely take this out of context or clip parts out and make it look like I'm saying something I'm not. That's what they always do. These people, the trolls that we get in every single, our Telegram channel, it just shows you that we're over the target. And again, to reiterate, to understand what this is, guys, this is something that goes well beyond. I know more Jewish people in every single facet of my life that are now recognizing where this comes from. People like Seth Rogen coming out on podcasts over the last year and saying, I was lied to my entire life about what Israel is. The world's waking up. And then you watch desperate people scream that something else is happening. That's all they can do. It's lazy and it's desperate. And right in front of us is what they're trying to do. Guys, it's obvious. I'm telling you, you got to stand back and look at the big picture. Here, let me just do this since I think it's an important time to play this one. And then we'll move on to the next segment that connects to this. The truth of Zionism.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
No, I was with him until he said the eternal capital of the Jewish people. President Trump has the right to make whatever foreign policy he wants, and if he feels that Miami Beach is best to recognize as the capital of Israel, that's his business, he can do it. But once he starts talking about the Jewish people, now he's encroaching upon religion, and now that's my domain. There is absolutely no political relationship between the Jewish people and Jerusalem. It's merely a holy city. The Jewish people don't have a capital. We never had a capital. Countries have capitals. States have capitals. That's the definition of a capital. Capital, dictionary, noun, the most important city or town of a country or region. Now, the Jewish people are not a country or region. The Jewish people are a religious community. We pray towards Jerusalem, but we relate to Jerusalem only as a holy city, not as a political capital city.
Hope all the screaming Zionist bots and trolls are paying attention. This is what they hate the most, because most of them are very aware of what this really is and just scream against the opposite. So it's all right. This is, look, I would, just like anything else, don't take this at face value. Look into it. And you'll realize how many very prominent Jewish people are rabbis and others, academics like Avi Shalem, are telling you that we're being misled. That Zionism is racism.
of the Jewish people. And all of those overtures that we make to Jerusalem and the yearning that Jews have for Jerusalem is only as a holy city, not as a capital city. And because it's a holy city, it doesn't matter who has sovereignty over it. Jerusalem is just as holy and just as much Jerusalem, whether it's under the auspices of the Turks or the Romans or the British or whoever. It's important to know that the Zionists were the ones that started this business of the capital of the Jewish people, and it's an idea that conflicts directly with the teachings of Judaism. At Mount Sinai in the desert, the Torah says, the Bible says about us, Hayom hazeh niyeh la'am. That's when we became a people. The Jewish people aren't a people because of a land. We're not a people because of a language. We're not a people because of a culture. We're a religion, and when we were deputized into the religion, when we accepted the religion given to us by God, that's when we became the Jewish people. We had no.
Now, remember, with Trump and Jerusalem, I mean, it's not hard to see the consistency of this. As much as left and right, all of our government is blindly adherent to Israel support, you can continue to see Trump making these huge moves for Zionism. And he's been the most pro-Zionist, pro-Israel candidate I've ever seen. And he's the one that illegally moved the capital. He's the one that gave them the Golan Heights. You have to understand how clear this stuff is.
Land, no territories, we had no capital city. And in fact, our commentators say the reason why God gave the Jews the Torah in the desert before they went into the Holy Land was in order to teach them that land, country, has nothing to do with your Jewishness. Your Jewishness is because you accept the religion. A couple of years ago, the Pope went to visit Netanyahu, and Netanyahu's bragging to the Pope, this is where Jesus lived in this land, and he spoke Hebrew here. So the Pope corrected him. The Pope said, no, Aramaic. And Pope was right. Netanyahu says, yeah, but he understood Hebrew. Well, maybe he did, but Hebrew was never the national language of the Jewish people. It was a holy language, just like the land of Israel was a holy land. Oh, by the way, if you see the clip and you don't know which of the two people talking is Netanyahu and which is the Pope's the one wearing the yarmulke. Even if we were to pretend that the Jewish people have a capital, that would have nothing to do with whether Jerusalem should be the capital of Israel, because Israel's not the Jewish people. Israel has nothing to do with the old Jewish Commonwealth. It's a country that was created in 1948. When you hear the Israelis or the Zionists talk about how Jerusalem has a connection with the Jewish people for 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 4,000 years, it's all true, but that doesn't translate to, well, therefore Jerusalem has to be part of Israel. People think that Israel is some kind of continuation of the Jewish government, but it's not. It's a completely different form of government, completely different values, completely different ideology, and completely different people. These are not religious Jews that are running the country. These are atheists.
I'll leave it there. That's about half the video. It's a great clip. I played it more than once. You get the gist of it, guys. And I've done entire focuses on that main topic. This is just something that came up yet again today that I thought was worth reiterating because of how clear that is. But let's talk about where that leads. Now, shout out to, I followed him in the past, but this is International Cyber Digest is where I first saw this. And this was a report from Amnesty International. First, I believe, Haaretz and another platform. And then Amnesty put together a pretty comprehensive, it's called the Intellects of Leaks. And it's crazy, guys. And we've talked about this quite a bit, right? We've talked about in the past, the idea of the pager attack, generally the infiltration of Israel and so on. We'll play that clip again today in a second. But this is to think about where this goes, right? We've seen Trump and his Zionist kind of blind us or whatever you think is driving that and allowing, open the door to the Pegasus group, NSO group and so on, or Pegasus and NSO group, allowing Israel infiltration through the guise of Doge and AI, large language models, and having access to everything the government has on you. These are all very real. It's mind-blowing that we're here. Or the many different people in his cabinet that are adherent, like blind religious Zionists, which means that it means so many alarming things that are in no way, shape, or form America first. I mean, I'm trying to think of more. There's so many other examples. We'll talk about the app that was used in a second. We'll talk about all the different technological or like Palantir and surveillance. This country is being infiltrated, if not already, like done, and either influencing policy or controlling policy. I don't know how we can't acknowledge that at this point. Now, this is about how like we're talking about the blackmail networks and so on. This is how this works, or the alarming overlap of potentially using this as an attack, which is very real to consider right now. First is just the idea that they hack into people's phones all around the world and then utilize whatever information they can to benefit their agenda at a time when they've never been more vulnerable, never been more attacked. So how many people are out there being threatened to stay quiet? So this is smartphones worldwide, silently infected with Israeli malware via malicious ads. The company is called Intelexa, and it says simply viewing their ads was enough to get infected. Surveillance company Intelexa gained full access to cameras, microphones, chat apps, emails, GPS location, photo, files, browsing activity. And that's the image we use today. Well, I added the Intelexa logo, but read what it says, guys, because this is not supposed to be for general consumption. They're bragging about what they can do. Media files, contacts, call logs, device info, passwords and tokens. So getting cryptocurrency overlaps as well. Passwords, user passwords, certificates, tokens, activate your microphone, cover a covert trigger of ambient recording, screenshots, cameras, device location, everything. And this is without even just simply looking at it. You don't have to engage with it at all. We've talked about the no touch, no engage Israel spyware. That's what this is to a large degree. Internal leaked company documents, sales and marketing materials, as well as training videos from the Intelexa leaks investigation provide a never-before-seen glimpse into the internal operations of a mercenary spyware company focused on exploiting vulnerabilities in mobile devices to enable targeted surveillance attacks on human rights defenders, journalists, and members of civil society. Now, the Pegasus overlap, the NSO group, that's what it was found guilty. For harassing and spying on journalists and activists in this country. We saw this happen over the process of the campus protests, the worldwide movement it went around the world, but of course in our country, they made it only about one thing, and they lied about that. It's one of that moment showed you the Zionist influence that was so shocking, because the evidence, I mean, people like Stefanik, I mean, they were in front of Congress just blatantly lying about things that happened, and even the police were there going, that just didn't take place. And they still carried this through, still passed the Anti-Semitism Act. Crazy. In an attempt to hide their spyware operator's identity, all data is relayed through a chain of atomization servers called the ACN Atomization Network. And anonymization, excuse me. Since the spyware relies on browser exploits, the operator must trick this victim into opening the malicious link. If the link is not opened, infection fails. Each time a one-click attack link is sent, it risks exposing the operator as a suspicious target, may share it with forensic experts. Now, that's why I said to a degree. Remember, there's, as far as I understand it, there's spyware they have that you don't even need to engage with. That's at least the reports that were going out. So that like it could just be sent to you and then you're compromised. To avoid detection, Alexis designed several delivery vectors, different approaches to triggering the opening of the infection link on the target's phone without requiring the target to manually click it. Right. So in this case, it technically needs to be open, but they found a way to get it to open without you engaging with it. So it's like half a step away from a no engagement kind of a thing. Yeah, it says right here, this enables Alexa to offer zero-click-like functionality without needing additional zero-click exploits. One slide shows they've been buying or partnering with ISPs to deliver their malicious payloads. This goes around the world, guys. And Samsung apparently was one of the main ones, but it's broader than that. Now, we'll just get into the actual reading of it, but what's important is that they not only, he includes the Amnesty link, not only is this about what it just went through, but it's, which one? Oh, it was about their Microsoft through their team viewing aspect, which I've worked with people in the past that have had me use that. So it just shows you that this is, we talked about Microsoft being so shockingly compromised. It is overtaken by the Israeli government. Their own employees are saying that. So here we are where this is happening. Then in this company's use, they use a team viewing thing where they get remote access. And then through that, they're able to open up this door. And so there's so many angles to this, and it's one part of this large conversation. So I'll include this just with this part to show you. It says the new research indicates that Intelex's Predator spyware, it's called Predator spyware, continues to be used to unlawfully surveil activists, journalists, and human rights defenders around the world, despite repeated public exposure. criminal investigations, and financial sanctions directed at the company and its senior executives. So magically, despite sanctions on Iran and the whole world shuts down, magically the U.S. goes, bad guy, sanctions, and then weirdly they still operate in the United States. Weirdly, they're still able to just take one step back and let another person run it. Like I keep telling you, whether it's Eric Prince or somebody else, they're not American companies. It makes it very clear. That's why one of the arguments they make in this, they call it the Rosetta Stone for spyware, is that it proves through this new research that these things are all interconnected. And that what we're talking about is Israeli companies that just use shell companies like they told us to circumvent sanctions. And the U.S. allows this. So here is Haaretz. This one's entitled Hacked in Pakistan. Israeli spyware firm Intelexa, owned by ex-Intel officer from Israel, still active amid U.S. sanctions. I'm baffled. I wonder why. Last summer, a human rights lawyer in Pakistan received a WhatsApp message from an unfamiliar number. It was a journalist, allegedly, sending a link to an article that mentioned the lawyer by name. So somebody randomly reached out and said, check this out, which people like me, that happens all the time, right? People that saw the show and want to send something. And it says the journalist profile picture looked legitimate. The article's headline plausible. The link purportedly belonging to the website of a prominent and trusted European media outlet. But the link was a trap, which is easy to fake, by the way, aside from all the stuff they have. And it says the site it led to was fake. Someone was trying to hack into the lawyer's device. It says this is the one example that caused this to explode. It says something about this message seemed suspicious, so the lawyer forwarded the link to Amnesty International. Clearly had a connection to them. And it says forensic analysis by their security lab revealed digital indicators known to the lab because they'd been looking into the Pegasus NSO in the past. It says that is long-tracked spyware, and it was Predator, the phone hacking technology sold by the Israeli Intelexa Group, a firm run by Israelis, but based abroad and sanctioned by the U.S. Based abroad because they're just simply, by putting it somewhere else, they circumvent the sanctions. Like the U.S. is not aware of that, but they allow it is the point. It says, according to forensic material seen by the investigation, additional malicious links were sent to other targets in Pakistan, politicians, in what was likely an attempt to infect their devices with the spyware. And additionally, we know that Trump's administration now is reopening the door to these things. In the past, they had this kind of like, we're fighting it, they're bad guys, but like I'm saying, they just let it happen. Now Trump is just going, we're working with them. And we'll get to that in a second. The investigation reveals for the first time the use of Predator spyware in Pakistan. And again, the point is globally, according to Amnesty International, a country that does not maintain diplomatic relations with Israel. So it's not even the argument that they're somehow working with them. This was espionage, and shows how Intelexa continues to sell its advanced hacking tools despite 2 years of American sanctions. Intelexa is likely the largest. Now, by the way, watch. I don't know whether this will happen or not. I find it to be clumsy if it did, but watch it. Donald Trump remove those sanctions, maybe quietly. But I get the sense that's where this goes. I don't know why they would need to, but it seems that he's just doing everything they want. It says Intelexa is likely the largest Israeli offensive cyber company operating outside of Israel and the marketer of the Predator spyware. Much of its senior staff and owners are Israelis working abroad. Predator is one of the most invasive spywares on the market. It's successfully deployed and installed on a smartphone. If so, it can hack the most up-to-date versions of Apple and Google's mobile operating systems. Think about that. Remember that game they played where they were trying to hack the Apple and FBI? I feel like we were being played. The idea, and who knows, maybe they just hadn't reached that yet, but they're literally telling you here they can deploy this without you engaging with it, and it's able to hack Apple and Google right now, highest possible level for the average person. I find that to be near, if not impossible, not in the sense that impossible, rather just unlikely, unless they're allowing that. And I think that's where we are. I think Silicon Valley is far more compromised than we realize. It says and this was according to leaked documents showing this. It extracts all the contents from the hacked devices, including messages from encrypted messaging applications, listens to calls, and remotely activates the microphone and camera, as well as gaining access to additional services used by the target from their phone. So an extension from the phone is services that they can connect through the phone. Crazy. The investigation even provides confirmation that a frightening infection capability, first exposed by Haaretz, an inside story as being developed by the firm itself, is now just functional, but it's not just now functional, but operational. Meaning not only are they putting this out and they're able to, access everything, but potentially an infection capability, meaning that you can be around somebody else's phone through Wi-Fi or meshing or whatever else, and then they can be infected too. It's like it's cyber pandemic almost. Maybe that's a connection. Who knows? I kind of don't feel that makes any sense, but the point is that was what they said a lot during COVID-19. I think there was just more of that connection for the narrative, but that kind of sounds like that in any case. One of the videos obtained by this investigation is a remote training session conducted via Microsoft Teams. And as far as I can tell, nothing has changed. I think Microsoft is exactly what you think it is at this point, and it's not something I would work with. That the spyware then activates a self-destruct mechanism designed to erase any forensic evidence used by Amnesty and others to confirm hacking. We saw this sort of thing with like the Vault 7 release a long time ago, where they were able to sort of leave, the cyber footprint of whoever they wanted you to think it was. These are things that are able to remove their forensic evidence as if it never happened. I mean, this is the alarming place we're in, and they are sprinting in the direction of everything AI and technological, digital, smart dust, and nanotechnology because they don't care. They don't care about our safety and protection and privacy. They just don't, guys. Otherwise, these things would be discussed and debated. It says the investigation's findings are being published as the spyware industry is no longer in the U.S. Right. But it doesn't change the fact that it is being flooded through this country. And on top of that, Trump is now opening the door, which they're going to get into. But it's, I argue, an extension to make, it's why it's not in Israel or the U.S. It's offshore, and it's the same conversation. It's like a Prospera overlap thing. They're doing it, and it is this agenda, but it's just building outside so they can pretend it's not them. I think it happens in every topic we can possibly think about. Just places in the world, the dark corners that no one's looking. The investigation's findings are being published as the spyware industry is no longer in the United States. No longer in the U.S. spotlight. I thought that was a period, but same point though, right? So it's no longer being discussed and focused on, but ultimately the spyware industry is what we talked about, is being built abroad, not in the United States, but outside of it, but then being flooded through the U.S. And it says it's no longer in the U.S. spotlight, and attempts to rein it in are easing up. So the current Trump administration is starting to relent on those restrictions. That's already been happening. We'll get to that in a second. This has already been reported back in April. Spyware maker NSO Group is paving its way back into Trump's America. Derek wrote about that in 2023 or 4, saying that, or I think it was 4, that Trump is going to be opening the door back to these groups. So it says U.S. President Donald Trump and his return to the White House has slowly reversed key aspects of his predecessor's policy. Although NSO and Candiru are still on the U.S. Department of Commerce's blacklist, along with Intellexa, currently, both of the former companies shifted to American ownership. Think about that. How in the world? It's sort of like the Muslim Brotherhood thing. So you're telling me that they're designated on the blacklist, but yet Americans own them and no one cares about that? There's no sanctions there. There's no illegal issue because we're just being lied to. They're just not enforcing this, guys. And so Americans have shifted. So it's like the TikTok thing. This is just a power shift. It's the same agenda, and it's still Israel. Continues. Trump also reactivated Paragon's contract with the Department of Homeland Security, a group that has been roundly criticized even by the U.S. government for being invasive, for being malicious, for being caught spying on governments and journalists and activists. But you know what? Israel likes it. Trump says, yay, okay. We are blind if we can't see what's happening. And it says that was frozen by Joe Biden, but that doesn't necessarily mean he was against it. That's just a different time, different narrative. Our government supports this, guys. Because realize, even though he did that, they still allowed things to happen. And it says, allowing U.S. ICE and Immigration and Customs Enforcement to regain access to their spyware. Right? So that's happened. Trump's allowed this to come back into the country. ICE is utilizing this to scan and spy, and Israel has access to that too. We've already seen this overlap. ICE is being trained overlap with the IDF, like police. In some cases, we have the AI overlap, the data overlap. It's just these barriers have been removed. I imagine we're going to find out much more about that as the time goes forward over multiple administrations. When they kind of go back and forensically look at the lack of siloed information that was there for privacy, they've just ripped it all apart to make AI better. We've lost control. Or rather, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Americans have lost control. The government, if we ever had control, is not acting in our interest. Paragon has also been acquired by an American fund, said to be close to the American intelligence community. So that's Israel. We're going to get to an article about the gray zone that makes this even more clear. But guys, this is broken. That's Israel now as American entities. And it says, acquired by Americans, said to be close to American intelligence, showing how the U.S.-led push to crack down on Israeli spyware firms led to their relocation to the United States. Yeah, so clearly they cracked down on them, didn't they, when they just moved them into this country? It says, together, the investigation's findings show how companies like Intellexa that were not acquired by U.S. owners are adapting themselves to sanctions. For researchers monitoring them and helping their clients' victims, this means Intellexa has not disappeared. It's just become harder to track and detect. Right, so they've helped it. Important thing to understand. And just in case you wanted to see more, it's very roundly covered, but here's key connections. Tal Dillian is the founder and leader, IDF's Elite Unit 81. That's where that's where he's from. Now realize, I might as well just include the article. I don't have to go into it all. The Prince and the Spy. Whitney wrote this for TLAV. It just simply highlights an article that makes it very clear. What's this article here? As it's reported by Israeli intelligence, that ultimately, where was it starting here? It states that since 2012, cyber-related intelligence projects that were previously carried out in-house in the Israeli military and Israel's in intelligence are now transferred to companies that in some cases were built for this exact purpose. In some cases, managers of development projects in the military and intelligence were encouraged to leave and form their own companies so they could then take over them. So it's a front. Very clear, guys. And I'll play that clip in a second after we get to some of these more points. But just remember how transparent this is. So when you have them claiming former commander, it certainly could be, but we have to, as they're otherwise telling you that they were told to leave to make companies intelligence could utilize and telling you they set up shell companies to affect the supply chain, that's what we should consider. You have Sarah, who is his wife, ex-wife, excuse me, who's a business partner, so also from Israel. Early investment from Israel Aerospace Industries for corporate and funding ties. You got shipments of equipment that come from Israeli firms. So we're talking about the spyware already built within it. You've got shell companies in British Virgin Islands and Ireland used to shift operations from Israel, violating export laws. We'll get into that. Like blatantly illegal. And the U.S. goes, I don't see it. They're from Britain. I don't see it. They know this is on just by design. Operational links, recruitment of ex-IDF hackers for the team. Remote access to client systems like TeamViewer, allowing Intellexa staff to monitor their targets through Microsoft. That's what they're telling you. They're literally using TeamViewer to monitor people through Microsoft. Ad-based infection vectors, like we talked about. Broader ecosystem, parts of Israel's spyware export wave, akin to NSO's groups Pegasus, all founded by ex-Unit 8200 and Unit 81 officers. That's used in the Sudan that we might get to if we have time in regard to supplying to the RSF militia. And we'll talk about that. It's the groups that they were funding and, they're pointing to the genocide as they're literally helping them do this. It's not secret with Israeli intermediaries. This isn't even about the Sudan discussion, but it's right there in front of you, literally giving the Sudan RSF weapons and spyware to carry out their genocide. UAE-linked logistics firms ship Intellexa gear to Gulf clients like Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And there's many more. Basically, if you read the full report, pretty much every single country that they're trying to normalize and manipulate, and while they're also conducting intelligence operations within these Muslim countries to make you think bad things are happening, they're flooding them with spyware. Now it says, despite sanctions, it thrives via proxies. Like the government doesn't know that. And it says, Intellexa's intelligence connections highlight how privatized intelligence networks fuel a global spyware arms race, often evading oversight. Again, let's pretend like they just absolutely don't know that's happening as they run a global arms race, or rather spyware arms race, through U.S. companies. They're either the most incompetent government in the world, or they're doing this or allowing it. Probably both. Now, new article, Spotlight. Israel, United States, NSO groups gamble on a Republican win. Comes up Trump's. The point is that this is something they leaned into. The Israeli spyware firm tasked Chartwell Strategy Group with lobbying Republican lawmakers in recent weeks. It is banking on the Donald Trump victory to help get it off the Bureau of Industrial. So here's what I'm guessing, that they're going to remove this company quietly off these problematic lists as we go forward. And they're using Republicans to lobby the Republican leadership. So it's not secret what's happening here, guys. So worth hearing this yet again, right? In case you hadn't seen it, only the first part of it, that this is what they're doing. And that's exactly what you just heard. Now we'll come back around to the phones, guys. The phones are the global infestation, if you will, of our cell phones and what that actually could mean. Not just this, I mean, this is the overlap, obviously. What he's discussing here is the fact that they use these shell companies, not just to manipulate the supply chain in a daily example, but use this to get these cell phones, or pagers rather, in the hands of people in Lebanon, let them circulate for years, and then acted like that was targeted. You let the children, it was mostly women and children. And so this is what we need to consider is currently happening, as we now see an event where Israeli spyware has been infecting people around the world.
How did you convince Hezbollah to buy this?
Well, obviously, they didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel. Shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor.
Pretty damn clear. And as always, that was an interview set up by Israel and promoted by Israel. So you can argue they're lying, but you can't pretend it's not clear what that is. So here was there something I shared on November 22nd. Tamer Naid shared this, and this has been verified since. Explosion of a modern smartphone inside a store in the Gaza Strip. Now, that was after, of course, Israel, in a very uncharacteristic move, was like, here, cell phones for people in Gaza while they're starving and killing them all. I mean, it's quite obvious what that was, guys. And I said, as Netanyahu said in front of 250 members of U.S. Congress in Israel during the One Israel 50, or I think it was 50 states, One Israel. I thought I had that in, maybe not. I didn't. I had it in the image. Maybe I didn't put it in the show title. In any case, he said, you all have a piece of Israel in your pocket. And I argued that that was a threat. And every day it seems more likely that was a threat, that they know what they're dealing with. They know the Samson option. They know what they did in Lebanon. They know what they're doing. They're helping their spyware tech. And they know that maybe it's being aimed at people abroad, but they also know if you irritate them, it could be aimed at you, as they'll happily say on shows if you push them. You all have a piece of Israel in your pocket. It really needs to be at least considered that there's something more to that. Then, as Mint Press News writes, a recent large influx of mobile phones into the Gaza Strip may have an underlying motive, with reports indicating some Samsung A17 models are malfunctioning and exploding. Now, does that mean they've got explosives, or have they found a way to make these phones explode by some kind of surge or whatever else? I don't know. Twitter user in Gaza cited at least 2 reported explosion incidents within 2 days. Here's a video on this. And this is the same post. Here's what she said. And this is a report. She's saying that she reporting more on this story, what she heard and what she's reported on.
Multiple Palestinians in Gaza have begun reporting that smartphones have started to explode in the hands of Gaza residents. Mobile phones, specifically Samsung devices, have been reportedly exploding in the hands of Palestinians.
Now, as far as I understand it, that's also the most susceptible to what we just talked about. So there's obviously something here, guys. Now realize this is the exploding phones has come to that happened. Whether or not that's connected to them doing that or just random happenstance is up to you to decide. But I find it really unlikely that that would happen once, let alone a few times in one location. Have you ever heard of that before this?
With at least 2 cases now reported, with one of those cases being a woman who was transferred to Al-Shifa Hospital with major injuries. Now, just recently, Israel had actually allowed a shipment of mobile phones into the Strip in a move that many thought was bizarre at the time. Now, many fear that this is a repeat of the Israeli pager attack on Lebanon, in which they sabotaged Hezbollah pagers to explode in the hands of civilians. People were left completely disabled, blinded, lost the use of their hands, injuries to their stomachs. That attack killed at least 42 people and injured 3,500 more. It was one of the deadliest attacks in Lebanese history. And since then, Israeli officials have gone on record to say that they have technology like this planted in devices all across the world.
I can't believe I forgot to say that. That was the other point. Is like we just talked about that. That was the ex-Mossad chief. I wish I had that pulled up. I forgot about that. I mean, I just, in this sense, that was like only a few shows ago. He came out and said in an interview, and again, you could argue he's lying, but I think it's pretty clear this is what's going on, that they've infiltrated, like the pager point. He made that the case, and then elaborated saying in devices in every country in the world. He said it very clearly. So either a threat of hype or a threat of reality. Either way, it's happening to some degree. And so that should be alarming regardless, guys. So she's absolutely right. That's what happened.
That very insider said there is not a technical device in the last 5 years that hasn't been tampered with. And when the interviewer questioned him and said, in Lebanon, he said, anywhere you can think of. In fact, it was actually just recently reported that many Samsung phones in the Middle East come with an Israeli spyware app pre-installed. The app automatically collects location and IP data and cannot be fully removed from devices. Those devices specifically being the Samsung A17, ones that explicitly ended up in Gaza in the hands of Palestinians. Israel has flooded Gaza with backdoored phones loaded with explosives, tracking their every movement. Cell phones have become a lifeline for people in Gaza to find the funds that they need to feed and shelter their families, and Israel is turning those devices against them. If you are in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in southern Syria, anywhere that Israel considers a target and you own a Samsung phone, throw that shit away right now.
Well, that's for you to decide. I mean, it's a hard thing, especially if that's something you can't afford, but I don't disagree. I think there's a reason to be concerned about that. At the very least, get something to put it in that's a blackout pouch or something. I don't know if that's going to help or not, or whether this is more hype than not. But it's worth understanding that this is not just, the pager attack happened. At the very least, that we know that there was explosives, whether they that is an event that took place. We know it's possible. We've seen this happen before. I think this is real. I think it's worth making sure we're on, aware of what Israel's doing to this country from a broad perspective. If you want to learn more about the pager attack and Israel's infiltration in U.S. tech in light of the Lebanon pager attack, I go into everything we're talking about now could be added to this, but I go into a lot of the background of the infiltration in tech. And just another episode talking about Israel's global cybersecurity infiltration. Now, Mohammed Shihada put this out January 14, 2025. Israeli media had claimed that Trump personally promised to allow Netanyahu to violate the Gaza ceasefire, right, and resume the war after signing a deal. Trump had a gift bag, they said, and it also included lifting all sanctions on Israel's spyware Pegasus and Israeli settlers and extremists, and allowing major West Bank land theft. One of those points being Pegasus. Now, part of that's already happened. I'm telling you, we're going to see more of this coming as this starts to explode. Here is the follow-up. This is all the way other end of the year. This is from November 7th, 2025. So that was almost a year ago, right? And then we saw all this happen in between. This is in a, what was it again? It was what case was this? It says NSO floats Pegasus spyware use in a time of domestic crisis in America. I forget what this was taken from. I'm trying to remember. I've only covered this in the past. Let's look right here. Judge bars NSO from targeting WhatsApp users. He's just including the information. I forget the context, but the point was the same. I covered this in the last show. If you remember which one it was, I apologize. I can't remember which one it was. NSO floats Pegasus spyware. So NSO Group, which Trump has opened the door for, which is part of this entire spyware ecosystem, basically floated the idea that Pegasus spyware could be used in this time of crisis in the United States. And he says, I believe they won't stop lobbying until they get Pegasus in the United States. It's the same conversation. But the point is, you can see it going all the way from last year, or rather just the beginning of the Trump administration, into right now. And it's gotten even more extensive with what just happened. And he goes, NSO Group is no friend of America or our values. For a decade, they enabled foreign governments to hack Americans and U.S. officials. Their entire business model is illegally hacking U.S. companies. They spent years arguing in courts that U.S. law doesn't apply to them. And Trump is letting them right back in. That's not a secret. That's what Israel's government's telling you. That's what Trump has allowed, as we've talked about already. Spyware maker NSO Group is paving a path back into Trump's America. Derek wrote about this in 2024. Meet the spyware companies preparing to unleash their tech during Trump's second term. He lists a whole bunch of them. And you've heard of most of them. We've talked about it in the past. And he's right. He nailed it. But of course, since we're independent media and we're nonpartisan objective, nobody knows that. Israeli spyware firm NSO Group found liable for hacks of WhatsApp users. This is 2025. So January, at the same time that other conversation was starting, they were being found guilty for hacking people. And Trump's going, come on in. But again, so is Biden, when you really understand the reality of this. State Department revealed to be using Israeli intelligence linked chat app. This got so little attention, it's insane to me. This is Walls, who was caught using Telemessage, which is an Israeli intelligence app, not some kind of like ex-owner, an Israeli intelligence app that's used to archive information and send back to Israel. He was using this, or technically it's used to archive information, but it is sent back to Israel. He's in the inner circle in the White House, in the Oval Office, in meetings like this, and he's using Telemessage to archive the signal conversation from the inner circle of the White House. And that goes back to Israel intelligence. And that's not a big deal, guys. That's espionage. That's insane that nobody talked about this. And all they did was make it about the signal point. They called it Signal Gate. Remember that? That was to deflect from what it really was. Ryan Graham reports, well, this is Lance Videos reports, absolutely no laws were broken in Signal Gate. No classified information was leaked whatsoever. Fantastic news. Guess what? This is coming from these fake independent media, new, the ones that will sign away their objectivity to work in the Pentagon, right? That's what these people are. Where the reporting comes from, rather. Ryan Grimm says, new Pentagon press corps has investigated the signal situation and found everything is perfect. Yeah, big surprise, right? So they're being told they can only give you what they tell they're allowed to give you, and we're supposed to trust that they're giving you the full picture, even though this implicates the very people that are feeding them the story. That's how this works, guys. They've signed over their objectivity to have past credentials. That's access journalism. It's just gotten a lot more clumsy and embarrassing right now. And also just overtaken with the independent mainstream media, or rather mainstream independent media. This is what they do. We investigated ourselves and we found ourselves not guilty. Well, Telemessage, in case you forgot this too, is directly tied in with extensive Unit 8200 currently employed. The ties we're highlighting in 2025, Mike Walls, who used Telemessage Signal app to log messages with Trump's administration. And it directly works with the Israeli intelligence. Just blows my mind. Okay. Gray Zone put out an article talking about, the title is, Former Israeli Spies Now Overseeing U.S. Government Cybersecurity. Not a joke. And I simply said, how much evidence will it take until the diehard partisans, tellingly even the side not in power, by the way, meaning there is no left-right divide if they're not calling this out, right? Even the ones that would take every example to go after Trump, they're not going, why is that happening? It tells you something. When will those diehard partisans start acknowledging this? It is not racist to point out that a foreign power has seized control over U.S. policy. And it's certainly not America first to hide from it. And it gets zero engagement. December 3rd. The Pentagon, Treasury Department, DHS, and a variety of other U.S. government agencies have begun relying on a firm launched by former Israeli military intelligence operatives to consolidate and protect their data. You'd think this was a joke, right? You'd think with what we just went through, it can't be real. It very much is. And we need to be real about what this is showing us, guys, with everything else put together. A company with deep ties to Israeli intelligence oversees cybersecurity across more than 70 U.S. government agencies, including the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. Guys, this is an occupied territory. We need to start. it shouldn't be, it's sort of like talking about ISIS and Al-Qaeda and realizing what that really is. We can't keep hiding from this. This is not about Jewish people. This is not about anything other than a foreign power that has so obviously worked its way into influence in this government to the point to potentially control. How in the world do we not see this? We're watching them commit a genocide. We're watching them commit crimes everywhere and blatantly lie in front of us to commit all sorts of crimes, whether it's an espionage or active kinetic warfare, and then let them control or rather oversee people that work with their intelligence apparatus who otherwise tell you they never leave that work. 70 U.S. government agencies, including the Department of Defense, Homeland Security. But gee, I wonder why we're the peace president's conducting warfare all over the world in Israel's interest. It's called Axonius, was founded by a former spies in Israel's Unit 8200. Guys, do you realize how many other units there are? At least we said there was 81 in that other one, which is there's overlaps that are still intelligence. But Unit 8200 is focusing on cyber warfare, and they are in everything everything Israel's touching inside our government is tied to that. Now, I shouldn't say everything, but it's damn close. Founded by former spies in the Unit 8200 and its software, which allows an operator to, quote, visibly and control over all types. Oh, it allows an operator visibility and control over all types and number of devices. Collects and analyzes the data, the digital signal of millions of U.S. federal employees. But who cares if Israel's got that? They probably already have, no, I'm half joking, they have access to damn near everything else through the AI dynamic. The stated aim of the Axonius platform is to centralize IT tools to identify and fix security breaches. This is as stupid as going, let's let Microsoft Sweet, let's use that to make sure we're secure. But itself has a backdoor for Israel. You're literally letting the fox in the hen house and saying it'll keep us safe. Or like rather, how it's like you're like letting. What's a good analogy? You know, the point is that this is a group that's being let in to check for vulnerabilities, who is in itself the vulnerability, and they know that. This is to trick us. I argue, as a product of Israeli intelligence. However, the scale of Axonius' use across the U.S. government raises serious concerns. Just over the top, guys. And there's a lot more you should read in this. It's not that long, but I just want to make sure you saw that, understand it. Now, one last thought that's probably a little far for some people. We've talked about this a lot. Catherine and I have talked about neuroscience, neuroweapons quite a bit. She's absolutely convinced this is something that's been deployed. James Giordano from the State Department has said this during COVID. He said the government used these things on us. So just thinking about the step into the future, right? What they're doing and what they have access to, the kind of technology they're working on, the ubiquitous influence. This is from November 21st from The Guardian. Mind-altering brain weapons, no longer only science fiction. Yeah. This article should be like 15 years old. So this is where we always are when these things have been deployed and used, and they're finally going, maybe in the future, and it's there. It's happening, right? So just understand that this is not a joke. And if they have the kind of ability they do and the kind of access, this is the kind, I mean, we should be concerned about them going extremely, like if we're, what's the best way to say it? With how vulnerable they are, both the administration and Israel, I wouldn't put anything outside the possibility of them. We should allow groups that are willing to genocide entire people access to anything, let alone, the ability to conduct psychological warfare in our country against us. Now, 2 points, and I'm going to get into Venezuela, and then I'll see where we are. It's a little close. We'll see where we are with time to get into the rest of them. But my plan is to talk about Venezuela, and I want to overlap that with the Sudan, with Somalia, and what their conversation is around that. But first, I've been wanting to play this for a minute. It's a good clip. It's short, but it just really, it's to start the kind of the war peace president part of the conversation. It's important to understand that well before Trump, Americans have been coming to terms with a lot of dishonesty, a lot of major lies that we've been told over our entire lives, whether it's basic ideas like, the founding of America to what we actually operate as today. The military, more than anything, has come through. Veterans are starting to come to terms with a very uncomfortable reality, which is that they conducted warfare for the wrong reasons. I've been saying this for a long time, and I've just been seeing it more and more and more because the warfare is getting worse and worse and worse. And now that everything seems to be coming to a challenge, every conversation is being, which I love to see. We always should be doing this, diving through every conversation, getting through to the meat of it, asking questions. Could they be lying? It's never been more clear. Comrade Misty says, I can't imagine how heavy it must be to realize that you were never serving your country. And I mean, I'll rephrase some parts of it, but I agree with what she's trying to say here. She says, you were serving rich psychopaths in a sick game for power, money, and control. You were nothing more than a pawn. You weren't defending or protecting your country. You were a terrorist for hire. That's rough. I hope they find a way to make peace with that. Now, I get it. I feel the same way, but I feel this needs to be, in my opinion, directed only at the government. There are people that are just bad people that want to go over there and kill, right? But I think that most people go into this with good intentions. They think they're fighting for the country. They believe that they're protecting everybody. And then they recognize that they're actually there for, whether decades ago, fruit companies, or today for oil, gold, and resources, or whatever else, geostrategic control. You're the bad guy, guys. And sometimes both sides are bad guys. But the reality is what they were doing was not for good reasons. And it's a difficult thing to come to terms with. So you could say that they were fighting for the country, but what they were put to while doing so was not for the country. See, I think it's important to make the distinction, because I think whether or not they were doing what they thought they were, the idea that they thought they were doing it and the sacrifice that entailed is worth respect. I would argue, though, if you're in the position where you realize bad things are happening, even in the military, you should stand up and do something about that, even if it's get out. But the problem is they put you in jail. It's not easy. Trust me. We talk with I'm blanking all of a sudden. Brad Miller. He's a good guy. We got to come back in for a conversation. We've had a couple interviews in here, and he's the one that stood up and refused to take COVID shot. And he was the commander of the 101st Airborne, one of the most respected divisions. And he let it all go because he had principles. And so it is possible, guys. But let me play this clip and just realize that everything's changing. And this is what I've always said in the past is when the enforcement arm begins to break down, that's when real change, real revolution actually happens. And I don't mean that in the violent sense. That when the police stop enforcing for their masters, then suddenly people realize they don't really have the power and things change. That's important to think about. Now, usually what happens is power structures try to take advantage of that before an organic change actually happens, because they never want the people to actually, governments almost work together, even if they're adverse or adversaries, in order to make sure that we never actually have something like that happen. You may not think that's the case. Historically, I think that's pretty clear. Here is the clip.
The point now where I don't think I fought for the country. I fought for some politician's view on something. There are particular guys that I think of that I killed. And I remember one dude in particular that I killed, and I shot his buddy. And then I came through his room. I killed him in front of his wife in a bedroom because he went for a gun. And I think about him now, and it's like, all right, why did I kill that guy? Well, because he went for a gun. Okay, but why did he go for a gun? Well, because I was in his fucking room at 2 a.m. Well, why was I in his room at 2 a.m? Well, because George fucking Bush was pissed that Saddam Hussein allegedly wanted to kill his dad, so we invaded. And then I start to think, was this guy funny? What if I met him in Paris over a coffee? Would we have actually liked each other and I just kill him because a politician sent us here for weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist? The only reason we were killing each other is because we were born on different parts of the world. That's it.
Yeah. When you start seeing Ukraine and some of these things that are happening right now, putting us in these wars that there's just no winners. And when you've been to those countries, it's like, damn, those are real people. I watched real people there. And it doesn't feel real from the United States because we just see it on TV. But when you've walked those streets, it just hits you different.
Right. And so they depend on the feckless, the people that would never, ever be able to even function in situations like that. Like your Nick Sorters and Benny Johnsons and all the rest, to stand here and scream and promote all the negative things they do as the freedom and democracy and war fighter warriors, when they would be the first people running and screaming, in my opinion. And the people that actually have the courage to go do these things are taken advantage of and come back and tell you this is wrong. And then those same people make fun of them. Those same people tell them they're libtards or whatever else. It's horrifying, guys. Everything is changing. And look, I believe it's in a positive way. We have to help manage that, because change is tumultuous. People can take advantage. Governments can step in and direct it how they see fit. We need to stay the course. As people who want positive change, need to make sure we direct that change in ways that are positive. And it's rife right now. It is open for change. Now, of course, they're trying to convince you otherwise. You didn't see today, the FIFA has awarded Donald Trump with their first ever peace prize during the World Cup draw. How insanely stupid is this? I mean, look, guys, Trump is going, Bush, Obama, they all went to war. But are we really going to pretend like this is the peace? I mean, even Obama had the wherewithal to say, hey, I don't deserve this. Trump's out there calling for it because he's so narcissistic. Give me the peace prize. You don't deserve this when you're going to war. And these screaming idiots out there continue to pretend like he's not. Venezuela is not the only dynamic. Somalia bombed more than ever. The Sudan continues. The ongoing bombing and actions in people, even Afghanistan, even though we're not talking about it. Same thing in Syria. It's absolutely destroyed. You could go off on any one of these locations, guys. The reality is they're currently involved in warfare all around the world like they have been for a long time. And Trump is building this pressure across basically the Southern Hemisphere at this point. And in the midst of this, as he's literally executing people in the middle of the ocean, you give a peace prize? I'm not trying to say that it's one worse than the other. I think the government and all of the representatives are not on your side. But if you're pretending like he's not doing that, you're just blind or you're dishonest. And I agree. Peace prizes in general have been bastardized and manipulated for a long time. It's all political, guys. That's all it is. Now, on Syria first, just to quickly point this out, we're over here talking about all these different things about peace and not war and Israel and fighting for freedom and the evil Muslims. And here's Donald Trump meeting with Jolani, a guy that they literally had a $10 million bounty on moments before they let him take power in Syria. And ever since, they've been ethnically cleansing. And the weirdness of the divide between U.S. and Israel doesn't even make sense to me right now, unless it's all narrative. The point is, Israel's doing what it wants, taking over territory, executing Alawites, Christians, and everybody else. I've gone over this extensively, working with ISIS groups on the ground. And this is not supposed to contradict everything, whether it's the drug conversation, whether it's the trafficking conversation, whether it's the Muslim conversation, whether it's the not war conversation. This alone makes it clear that we're being deceived. And yet the screamers continue to scream. Israel's illegal detention of a U.S. citizen, which, by the way, was finally released, if you didn't see the follow-up to that, which, of course, none of the America First politicians said a word about that because Israel, of course. And Trump makes Al-Qaeda great again. That's what this is about. They're making fun of you guys. You must see that by now. Now, Scott Horton highlights what this person wrote. Important article from the Cradle Media. This one was entitled, it's right here. Inside Syria's state-backed cover-up of Alawite women's kidnappings. Right. So right now, they're allowing women to get kidnapped, but they care about women and they care about trafficking and they care about, no, they don't. They don't care about any of this. They're letting this happen because of the extremists that they support because Israel doesn't care. So the U.S. can't do anything about it, or it doesn't want to, however you want to view that. This important article detailing efforts by the Jolani government to cover up the kidnapping, rape, and forced marriage of Alawite women. Think about who's screaming about forced marriages in Europe and elsewhere, or Muslims and other places. Well, this is literally happening in the Israeli-controlled location and the U.S.-backed leadership in Syria. Where are you at on that, Laura Loomer? Are you going to scream about all these things? Now, she has made comments about this, but my point is the same. Continue to support both Israel and Trump, which makes you a ridiculous hypocrite. So Scott Horton says Jolani killed U.S. troops in Iraq. He did. Remember, they make the claim about Soleimani, by the way, before they illegally assassinated him, Trump, in an airport under the guise of peace talks. Not a joke. They said he fought Americans and killed Americans. Well, what he did was defended Syria when the U.S. was illegally invading. So you can call him a terrorist if you want, but you'd be a ridiculous person for trying to claim something like that. Even if you actually think he was one, that's not why you would call him that. And the reality is he was not. He was a highly respected person and he was not a terrorist. Over here, Jolani killed U.S. troops in Iraq. But weirdly, now he's in charge of Syria, and we don't even talk about that. See, they don't really care about anything, let alone U.S. personnel. He pledged his allegiance to the butchers of New York City. And yes, his Syrian al-Qaeda regime is involved in systematic kidnapping, rape, and forced marriage, but he's against Iran and Hezbollah. America first? No. Israel instead. Painful, guys. How stupid some people can be today. Max Blumenthal in November put this out, and this is just examples of this. Putting Alawite captive in cages to use them as human shields in Ghouta in Syria was one of the most grotesque acts committed by the Syrian opposition. The activist who conceived the stunt, Bara Abdul Rahman, seen speaking on the truck right here in the video, who is reportedly now the media director for Syria's Ministry of Justice. You can't make this stuff up, guys. The guy, the whole time, the people beheading children, the one putting women in cages, human shields, all the stuff they try to project onto Syria are now the people they support running Syria, not Assad's government. How long can we let this continue? It's just, I mean, maybe it just is that nobody else, I mean, I don't believe that. I think this is obvious. And I think anybody, it's so prominent on Twitter, the average people see this, guys. It's clear. See, it says Shadi al-Wasi, who oversaw public executions for morality crimes, you know, the same thing that they criticize about Iran doing, even though it's not really happening the way they claim it is, as a judge for Syria's al-Qaeda branch, is headed the Ministry of Justice. They're laughing at you. While the Trump White House floods the U.S. with Islamophobic propaganda, it welcomes Syria's government with open arms because it folded to Israel occupation. How pathetic. And Kevork Almassian, who you should follow for a lot of reasons. Syria is one of the important ones he's covered over the years. Imagine watching this happen for 14 years and then laying down your arms and trusting the al-Qaeda regime. Now think about the overlap with the military, guys. Those people fought in Syria or Iraq or anywhere else and then turn around and watch this. What do you think that does to you? Now let's not forget, this is an actual image. Both are, by the way. You could check it on the reverse image shirts. These are two images directly taken from Syria after the U.S. and Israel took over, really Israel, after they removed Assad and let Jolani take power. As Israel further occupies Syria, Western-backed ISIS patch-wearing terrorists begin executions. And it's only gotten worse since the beginning. This person writes, after last night's serious incident in Syria, this is on 28th, Israel has delivered tough messages to the Syrian regime. A senior security source tells I-24 News tells them that forces linked to the Syrian president may have been involved in the incident and wounded 13 IDF troops. So now you've got an example of the Syrian elements that basically they've allowed to be in power having a little skirmish with IDF troops. Okay. Propaganda and co. And basically then they responded and then claimed they were he says, we were attacked for attacking you, which proves to us that we must start attacking you. Right. So they're there doing things and bombing and attacking and occupying, and they respond to that. And then they use that as the justification for needing to attack more. It's the same thing they do everywhere. Same thing the U.S. government does all over the world, or even in protests when they come up and push you and then you do something and they go, oh, you started violence. Just recognize how broken and ridiculous it is. And this makes it even more comical. November 30th, American and Syrian forces conduct airstrikes on ISIS, says the U.S. military. Okay. So wait a minute. So you're telling me at the same time Israel is bombing and fighting with the Syrian forces, the U.S. is working with them to bomb ISIS while Israel's working with ISIS to bomb Syrian sources. It's either completely made up or this is typical U.S. foreign policy, like we saw in Syria before all of this, where you had state-backed forces fighting CIA-backed forces. Not a joke. It was very publicly covered. These people have, I mean, I don't know if it's incompetence or just completely disregard for human life. Probably both. You just can't see. You have to laugh at the stupidity of having Israel work with ISIS members in Gaza, by the way, the GHF. These were ISIS-linked gangs. There it is. Just in case people want to see it from Haaretz. What's wrong with that? How Israel trained and armed ISIS-linked militias. That's very public, except in the U.S., apparently. And the point is that they work with them and train them, and these are ISIS-linked gangs. They work with the ISIS elements in Syria. Oh, yeah, they work with them everywhere, by the way. In Yemen, everywhere else we can talk about. I've proven this over the years. So Israel's working with ISIS, so too is the United States, working with them to fight Syrians in Syria who don't support them, while the American government pretends to work with them to bomb the very groups Israel's working with. It's just ridiculous. And here's why this might make a little more sense, but you don't need to hear this from her, even though she kind of, I guess because she kind of makes it sound like they're good people. Overall, she's admitting what you should already know. And as I said, anyone worth your time has been telling you this for years. Israel and the United States work hand in glove with ISIS and al-Qaeda. This from a former CIA agent. Pay attention.
Have to go to ISIS and al-Qaeda to go back against Iran. What I loved about working with the Israelis is they're very American. We could get into shouting matches during meetings sometimes, not like we're super mad, but we're trying to really say, well, my idea is best, well, my idea is best kind of thing. And then would be like, hey, you want to go have lunch? And we're all fine. You know, it was just a really, it's a really nice place to work. They're good allies of ours. We need to protect them. I do know for a fact that, that we argue sometimes with them, but I also know for a fact that we're committed to helping protect them, keep their state. You mean CIA and Al-Qaeda worked closely together in Iraq?
And Syria. And in Syria to overthrow Assad, of course.
To overthrow Assad and stuff like that. There were times when our covert action would allow us, findings would allow us to go and actually have meetings and talk to the quote-unquote enemies to try to bring things down as CIA officers.
Everyone, most of the world, has a problem with Al-Qaeda and ISIS-Daesh.
Right. Right.
You have less of a problem
Everybody
because
does.
the CIA worked with ISIS-Daesh and Al-Qaeda.
If we worked with them, we would know what they were doing better, that's for sure, and understand it. If the plan is for us to work with them, to work on a security agreement, which we have done with enemies before, and we've played that part as well as side by side with the diplomats, honestly, and whatever other countries are involved. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that was happening, and I would call it possibly hopeful.
In fact, that's why the newspapers once in the United States celebrated Qasem Soleimani as a fighter with the American troops against ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
He was, and now it's switched. Now we have to go to ISIS and Al-Qaeda to go back against Iran.
See, it's not even secret. I mean, the stupidity of all this is that this is what they've always been doing. So now, like, there's even been brief moments where U.S. politicians have, like, floated the idea that maybe we can work with them. And that's just because there's already been going on, and that door needs to be open for it to somehow be normalized. It's very transparent, but I don't think they can ever make that happen now because of how much they've used it, and Israel continues to. You can't build an entire, lifetime of foreign policy on the fact that you're fighting a group that later gets turned out that you were that group, because it's not going to work. But she's openly telling you that, guys. She's saying, we've worked with them. And I've been telling you this my entire career because you could prove that. It's one of these stories that just the mainstream alternative media just won't let become normal, even though it seems most people are somewhat aware of that. So it's worth considering, guys. And as it comes up with Iran and the rest of it, yes, it's going to be used in one way or another. Now, let's talk about Venezuela. As she talks about the CIA and the overlap, here's this article to start with. This is from the 19th of November. Trump signs off on possible CIA operations in Venezuela. Think about saying that. Can you imagine if Maduro was like, we're conducting intelligence operations in Florida? Obviously, I think they're all doing things like this, but for them to just lay it out, like, that's a war crime, guys. Or not a war crime, but an act of war. What you're doing is clearly taken as a violation. The U.S., Trump would lose his mind if he caught a spy or whatever else, other than Israel, of course. So this is just showing you that they're trying to create tension. They're trying to create problems. And of course, the person that they want to put in power, you should recognize by now, is the person that Israel supports. A person who literally wrote to Netanyahu saying, please regime change Venezuela. That's not what Venezuelans want. So this is not somebody fighting for the Venezuelan people. Yeah, Israel says Venezuela's Machado voices support and called Netanyahu. And then here is Alex Rubinstein giving you the letter that was literally written to him, saying, Netanyahu, please regime change Venezuela. That's who they support. Now, some of these we've talked about in the previous shows, realize that support for this entire agenda has collapsed. Republicans don't support it, despite what they keep yelling. Now, this came out. This was the 29th of November. The story was that Hegseth had ordered the strike. It killed some of them. Some of them were on the side, kind of floating around, and he said, kill them all. Bomb them again, kill them all. Sort of like a double tap in Israel's agenda. And that's illegal. We played that to open from Napolitano. It's just, no matter what you think, it's a crime. That's not the way our law is conducted. Or rather, the way that the law, if you understand the law, as even Napolitano highlights, they're supposed to be rescued and put to jail, whatever. Regardless of whether you want to or not. Regardless of whether Megyn Kelly says she wants them to suffer because she's disgusting. You don't even know who these people are. It's just whether or not they're even criminals. To want them to suffer makes you a disgusting person. That's what they're trying to warp us into, guys. Kill them all, he says. So this is when they start to defend this. Now, remember, that came out and it was really bad for them at the moment. Hegseth was being called out. There was a moment where he tried to pin it on the admiral. Then chat came out that proved that what he actually said was the opposite. So he tried to throw somebody under the bus who's technically under him, but it's an admiral, which makes it even worse, even though he was responsible. So not only a coward, but also trying to blame it on somebody who works under you. I mean, that's not what leaders do, guys. And it also makes you a coward. You're trying to shuck responsibility on somebody else. And then this came out. This is why they evolved the narrative. And they were trying to get back on the boat. They were trying to begin the operation again, which it makes sense to only a child. So you bomb the boat. Okay. Which clearly destabilized the boat, and they're floating in the water, and you're telling us they tried to regain the boats and get the drugs together and take off again while you're there ready to bomb them, and while the boat likely wouldn't even operate. The point is they're trying to create the justification to say that's why we had to kill them. Well, that wouldn't be legal even if you were telling the truth. It says ABC's ABC said, and tonight, new information. According to a source familiar with the incident, the two survivors climbed back onto the boat after the initial strike. They were believed to be potentially in communication with the others. Sure, because that makes sense. And salvaging some of the drugs. Because of that, it was determined that they were still in the fight and valid targets. And the fight? Like, you have to realize they're not even supposed to be bombing them in the first place. That's not legal in any stretch of the imagination, let alone twice to make sure you kill them all. These people have lost the plot. I don't think Hegseth even realizes what he's doing. And where was it? Which one was it? Two survivors climbed back on the boat after the initial strike, believed to be in communication. There was some other thought I was going to put in there, but so salvaging the drugs and so on. And remember, drugs in regard to where they are, international waters, there's countries around, plenty of countries don't consider it the same crime. So there's no way in which they can just argue they have unilateral ability to murder people in the middle of the ocean based on, that wasn't what it is. It's just the idea that why would we take this at face value? They've been caught lying about this story already. Now you just add more to the story that even if it was true, would still be a crime, and then say that just makes it all better. And then all the blind supporters go, see, right, taking at face value a statement from a government that's been lying incessantly. Even if you believe they're on your side, you're not a rebel fighting the deep state when you blindly repeat and parrot what the government says. This is JAG officer was also giving legal advice. So he says, so again, David, the video will be key, and Admiral Bradley will be on the Hill tomorrow. And so Justin Amash says, Hegseth reposted this as though it helps his case. He might be the most incompetent person in the administration. I disagree. I think he's definitely incompetent. That these guys, quote, were still in the fight is ludicrous. There was no fight. Nobody has alleged any armed engagement. So that even if the fight would be with you and trafficking they're trying to argue that if they ever end up in the United States, those drugs immediately kill all these people. Even if that was even proven, it does not mean you murder people as if you're engaged in a war. That's not immediate risk. And they're making it up, by the way. We'll get to that in a second. The numbers they throw out, they're just ridiculous. It's like, you know what? I think it is because these people like Noam aren't very bright, but they also because they think you're that stupid. It says there was no fight. Nobody's alleged any armed engagement. They're hundreds of miles from U.S. shores. Now, the administration on the 4th says they were allowed to kill the survivors of the boat strike because they were calling for help. Different narratives in different days, right? Now it says they're calling for help. So in the Trump administration theory, the survivors should not have tried to survive. And by trying to survive, they made it lawful to kill them. I'm speechless. I mean, these people, I think this is the best they can do. The phrase calling for help was a hostile act is really going to stay with me, he says. Calling for help was a hostile act. Wow. Okay. Salty Goat, of course, comes out and says, so the survivors climbed back in the boat and were trying to salvage drugs, and that's why they were hit again. How effing stupid are Democrats looking right now? Why? Because this Israeli asset comes in and tells you that's what happened? These people are children in a world full, they're the ones trying to tell you, that they're the same point. I can go over it every time. The new media trying to break down the facts. We're fighting the bad guys. And you blindly repeat what was told to you. Now, even if they're honest people, you are stupid for repeating it without your due diligence. How the hell do you know that's true? And why would they look stupid if you haven't verified that? I said these are the patriots fighting the deep state who regularly and blindly take at face value the claims of the government and who are too dense to recognize that these are illegal actions even if every claim the government made from the start were even true. IG report confirmed that Hegseth showed disregard for safety of troops. You'd think that would be the main story of the conversation. The report, the Investigator General's report from the Pentagon found that he was guilty, that this was a crime, that he showed disregard for the safety of even U.S. troops. And yet it's all deflecting in narratives. On the 4th, because this was before that, they bombed another one. Congress never authorized this military campaign, so it's unconstitutional and lawful for no matter how great you might think it is. Exactly, guys. That's the point of making the entire time. You can argue that the law should be different, and we can have an honest conversation about that. But as we're currently standing, those were illegal acts, regardless of everything they've said. And also, they're lying about most of that stuff. As it says, facts don't care about your feelings, right? Except the people that used to say that are the ones trying to hide from that right now. Now, here's Judge Napolitano telling you straight as it is. And conservatives hiding from this if they're dishonest.
No pleasure to say what I'm about to say because I worked with Pete Hegseth for 7 or 8 years at Fox News. This is an act of a war crime, ordering survivors who the law requires be rescued instead to be murdered. There's absolutely no legal basis for it. Everybody along the line who did it, from the Secretary of Defense to the Admiral to the people who actually pulled the trigger, should be prosecuted for a war crime for killing these 2 people.
And who would give
Yep, absolutely. Now, I think they were double tapped and hit because right now the effort is to try to hide what's really happening. I genuinely think this is about, it's obviously about the Venezuelan regime change effort, but something more. But they don't want people to survive because when they do, they can go, we weren't doing that. Or here's what actually happened. Or they can go in front of a news channel and say, I was transferring drugs, but to a place where it wasn't illegal and I wasn't going to the United States, whatever it may be, because they don't even caring about any of these stuff. So getting rid of them makes it much more easy. Now, remember that one example I showed you right in the middle where they made this big show of seizing drugs on the boat? I told you at that time, then why was that different? Why? They said, we got 50,000 pounds of whatever. Okay. Well, then why did you seize that and then bomb all the rest of them and then go right back to bombing them right afterward? I'm arguing it's because they somehow knew for sure there were drugs on that one and they wanted to make a show of it. There's no difference. If you're seizing them, why would you pause bombing right then? Just these people are out of their depth, guys. I don't know how else to say that. ABC, the family of a Colombian fisherman, this is like the 4th one as far as I understand it, who was killed on September 15th, U.S. military strike in the Caribbean Sea, has filed a formal complaint with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights alleging U.S. government illegally killed him. The family of him. Which, they're going to, if they're not engaging with Supreme Court rulings, they're going to go, we care about that. Now, Pam Bondi and Noam, this is just so embarrassing. Pam Bondi claimed that Trump saved 258 million lives by stopping fentanyl. Even though fentanyl does not come from Venezuela. Okay, they'll keep lying about that. Trump this Monday said 300 million people died last year from drugs. Kristi Noem says something similarly insane. The total number of U.S. overdoses deaths for 2024, 70,000. Guys, these people are ridiculous. I feel like I can almost see Gabbard, who's not stupid, rolling her eyes in the background, sitting next to the stupidest people in the room who are or just willing to lie when they know you can look it up. 70,000 overdose deaths in the United States in a whole year of 2024. But somehow you've saved 300 million lives by stopping a couple of boats that didn't have fentanyl. This is how dumb they think you are. I know that they're wrong. I said these people are both desperate and incompetent. It's a dangerous combination. Now, as I was telling you guys, these narratives get adopted by people who don't know that they're wrong and just absorb it. I think it happens to themselves sometimes. Bondi and Noam and McLaughlin, I think they end up parroting things they read and in certain people's, Benny Johnson, for example, I've seen that happen already. And yet he was selling the narrative that they're supposed to influence average people, and they just weren't a part of the lie, I guess. I don't know. They get caught up in their own BS. In this case, the Tennessee Hollerer, this person, Navarro, is on CNN saying, this person's arguing fentanyl is coming from Venezuela, and he's simply going, no, fentanyl comes from Venezuela. You're wrong. You're lying to the American people. This person says, your job day is The View, as you have no job. They're arguing that it comes from Venezuela. This is how we see this. It gets parroted despite, half a second of due diligence. We'll show you that that's not true. And they lied in the beginning anyway. So Glenn simply says, anyone claiming that fentanyl comes from Venezuela is simply lying. If Harrison Fields or whoever wants to argue for regime change or bombing boats in Venezuela, learn the most basic facts and or stop lying. Getting validly fact-checked by Ana Navarro is as bad as it gets. Think about that. This is the guy claiming it. This is the woman who has no real, none of these people should be taken seriously. And arguing that this is coming from Venezuela when you can check and clearly show these people are just parroting. I guess the point I'm making is not just the parroting, but that they think it. They actually think that's the point. So they're caught up in the propaganda and they're at the head of the media apparatus. I mean, come on. It's pretty sad. But so remember, they're lying about that, and Trump and them are still pushing that. You got Kristi Noem and Bondi in front of everybody claiming that. But it's just not true. See, then you have to ask yourself, did the Benny Johnsons and Nick Sorders, do they not even know? Are they that stupid or are they that dishonest? There's only two ways to look at it, guys. Okay, so here's Anna Paulina Luna telling you these people are terrorists. Okay, well, let's just take a step back here. Maybe everything they said is true. I can prove it's not, but everything's possible. So you're telling me you're shipping drugs in a boat, even to a place that's illegal. Let's just say we know that. In what world does that become terrorism? In what world does anything they're doing, other than what they're doing, in fact, but the claims of people, immigrants, whatever, Antifa. You guys are this has become cartoonish. It's always been like this. The word terrorist was used to apply to their enemies, but as everything else this administration is doing, they're making it embarrassingly clear. And I think, again, it's because the people they've employed are just not good at this. But these people are not terrorists. She calls them dogs.
Argument that these people are somehow innocent and deserve due process. When you're willingly making a decision to kill American citizens, when you're coming in and betting.
Can I just start right off the bat with that? So the whole point of the due process conversation, it's not even the right framing on this. Like there's an international reality around the idea of what can happen in this. But my point is that you're claiming they're bad guys. Well, how do we know that? How does the international court know that? See, this is why there's a process, because then you can go terrorist, murder, and we knew it because, we said it was a terrorist. So it's all checks out, right? You don't get to use your statement to justify the claim or the action you carried out. So she's saying they don't get due process, they're terrorists, but we don't know that. It's very simple. It's just like the conversation with immigration. They don't get due process, they're illegal immigrants. Well, how do we know that? How did you prove that if you didn't give them a process? And then we found out tons of them weren't actually illegal. Remember how that all worked out? Same thing here. So they're just trying to use their narrative to float the idea as if we're too stupid to realize that we need to verify that they are in the first place for that to even make sense.
These people are somehow innocent and deserve due process. When you're willingly making a decision to kill American citizens, when you're coming in and benefiting terrorist organizations, we do not treat you as people that are innocent, but also to remember there was an intelligence assessment and report that came through.
See, she's compromised two important things in foundational American ideas just right there. Probably because she's working for another country, but let's go back and listen again.
And benefiting terrorist or decision to kill America, how innocent and deserve due process. When you're willingly making
So due process, understanding from the Constitution's perspective, as we talked about, if you really understand what it means, God-given inherent ideas. It was outlined as human beings have inherent, rights. Not just Americans, but people. The point was that you could only enforce this within a certain boundary. So that's the United States, with the hope that more people would adopt that idea as human values, as the idea of inherent God-given rights. How can they be inherent and God-given if it only applies within a certain boundary? We just can't be this dumb. And so what she's saying is they don't get due process. Well, guess what? Everybody in the world, if we believe these things, is afforded a process before you murder them. This comes down to an inherent supremacy, but from this case about Americans, apparently. The idea that you only get these things if you're American. So these human beings just aren't afforded any kind of a process before you execute them with guys, that's not human. Or I shouldn't even say it like that. It's very human in history. My point is that that's just not what we pretend we are. Whether it's U.S. law or international law, these people are showing you that they are exactly what they claim they're always fighting.
decision to kill American citizens. When you're coming in and benefiting terrorist organizations, we do not treat you as people that are innocent, but also to remember there was an intelligence assessment and report that came through.
All right. So I guess we're no longer innocent until proven guilty. Right? You're guilty because we said. Now we'll figure it out later, right? Take the guns first, process later. Some point, conservatives, more than anything, need to start recognizing what's really happening. And I'm of the mind that the majority already does. But I'm talking about the ones that are absolutely still doubling down. It's pretty clear.
So they were deemed as narco-terrorists and thus treated as such.
Deemed by the government that has an interest in doing so, with no verification, no law, no process, no evidence. Nobody has, other than a few examples, have given you anything to prove this.
I think a lot of people have wondered, and if you're listening in right now, where do you stand, Representative Luna, on the president's boat strikes? If I was in his position, I would be doing a heck of a lot worse. I do not believe.
A lot worse. How about more? Yeah, I agree. A lot worse. These people are ridiculous. They just don't even. They're drowning in their own incompetence.
That you negotiate with terrorists. I certainly don't believe that you.
Oh, you don't negotiate with terrorists, except for the thousands of times you're out there negotiating with terrorists. What about the Gaza ceasefire conversation? These people are ridiculous. It's just narratives. No, I don't negotiate with terrorists. This is like an old school comment from a neocon, even though they did in many times.
You treat them as anything other than the absolute dogs that they are, and so I fully support the president in his position. Now, to be clear, if these were American citizens, this would be a different story. But they're not.
Okay, but how do you know, right? Because there's no process. What if there's an American stone underneath? I just made this point. What if there was an American child being trafficked, human trafficking? Right? It's horrible, right? What if that was happening? You're telling me they're criminals, right? So you bomb the boat and you figure it out later? What if it's full of women down there? What if it's all American citizens? What if you got it wrong and that boat wasn't what you thought and it was actually a bunch of Americans partying? It's just, I'm making points. Clearly, I would imagine they could see that. You have to understand that you don't know that because they're not verifying that. It's the same conversation. I don't even know whether she can piece that together. But she's crazy in this. What she's saying is belligerent and illegal, as Judge Napolitano just said. And not just because he said it, but because it is. And of course, she says, we do not negotiate with terrorists. And Dave says, but you love terrorists. Isn't that the truth? Dave Smith highlights what Marco Rubio put out. This is in 2019. This is the main guy pushing for war in Venezuela, Little Narco Rubio. To the right-wingers who apparently haven't learned a thing from the last 25 years, a full-scale war in Venezuela will be for us what Libya was for Europe. The refugees won't be going to Sweden. Right? It's funny. Then we act like, we're being invaded. What are you talking about? In fact, what happens is these are executed for Israel's benefit, and then Israel manages that migration into the United States for its crazy Zionist end times agenda. And plenty of other things, including organic migration, but we need to see it. They've talked openly about it. But yet, Laura Loomer will direct you against anybody else to continue that agenda. But look at what he posted, guys. He posted the leader, Gaddafi of Africa at the time, who, whatever you think about him, which I don't trust any government member of, there was free education, free healthcare. I was forgetting the last one too. And you could easily prove this. It wasn't a secret. There was many things done to help the people of the country. And then they destroyed him and the country was better? No, it got absolutely destroyed. They started having an open slave market sold in the area. And then they all just moved on because that's what freedom looks like, apparently, to the U.S. government. After they go, freedom, Libya, get them out of the way. And then they'll just leave and let the warlords take over. Does anybody need to explain to you? If they were trying to liberate Libya and they were doing this for freedom, then why did they let it immediately fall to the warlords and never look back until later when they had an interest to go back? Because they don't care about freedom. Not even their objective. It's crazy. Remember, this is the guy, he got brutally raped in the middle of the street and killed because of him. And then, or because of the government. And then the country collapsed. Here's a clip of Marco Rubio. We'll play this and tell you what Glenn said.
The Venezuelan regime is a source of instability in the entire region. Over 8 million Venezuelans have flooded into neighboring countries as a result of the regime's activities within their own country.
Don't forget, he was one of the ones that literally called for them to come to the United States. Then they used them. This has been a circular dynamic for a long time.
Into the United States. They also happen to be the foothold of Iran. That's not spoken about enough. Iran, its IRGC, and even Hezbollah has a presence in South America. And one of their anchor presence, especially for the Iranians, is inside of Venezuela.
Doesn't this just get tiresome? Just the same old thing over and over. Now, maybe if they had any evidence to back it up and not just narrative, that maybe they were, but not, and also getting proven to be lying almost every single time. Just narrative every time, but Iran and Hezbollah and bad guys. These are the groups that are fighting against the most obvious genocide in history. And I mean that, obvious. It's the most live-streamed, obvious, documented genocide in history. And pretty much every other one I could think of was also connected back to a group we're talking about. Not a secret. It's not racist to point out provable inclusion, but we'll talk about that in a second. What was it? The
Iranians is inside.
I think that was it. Just Iranian connection. It's just the same old thing from Rubio over and over and over. Glenn says Maduro will give WMDs to Hezbollah. Doesn't that sound familiar? Which, by the way, he has, as far as I could tell, does not have them. It says which will use it to attack the U.S. Or, at the very least, it's possible that we don't want the smoking gun proof to be in the form of a mushroom cloud over the U.S. Best to act now and eliminate the risk, right? Get rid of them before the thing that we tell you will always come. They're just manufacturing consent for this, guys. That's what they do every single time. And they've always been lying. They lied about WMDs. They lied about Syria. They lied about Afghanistan. They lie. And why would we trust them now? Because the same old screamers like Jalek Jones and the rest will find a way to support it, even though they always claim to be against everything. Another clip.
Also happen to be the foothold of Iran. That's not spoken about enough. Iran, its IRGC, and even Hezbollah has a presence in South America, and one of their anchor presence, especially for the Iranians, is inside of Venezuela. So we just finished talking about Iran and the hostility.
What does that even mean? Anchor presence? So what, Iran is an ally with Venezuela? Yes, because many of these countries are working with each other because the U.S. and Israel and the rest of these so-called Western nations are destroying everything and raping and torturing and murdering and stealing and forcing and strong-arming. If you really don't know that by now, what have you been doing, guys? Anybody in any part of this conversation can see the history of this government. The idea that you can simply say, in what essence, in what form, what are you talking about? Is there a group? Or are you just broadly making the claim that somehow Iran has a foothold in Venezuela? You're just trying to make the claim that we have to destroy this country, seize its assets because Iran, period. Because Iran's there. Even though, okay, then take a step back further. Show me where Iran has been conducting warfare. Where has Iran been conducting regime changes? Where has Iran been conducting genocide? Where has Iran been using human shields? Where has Iran been killing? I mean, guys, you can go on forever. I'm not saying we should trust the Iranian government. I want no government to exist. I think Iran, like any government, would abuse what it can to gain what it can, but it is not clearly the same as what we're dealing with here. Question them all, hold them all to account, but deal with what you can see accurately. What we see the U.S. and Israel doing, even only what we can prove, not even what we know has really happened, but just what you can prove. And they compare that to every claim they've ever made, even if not true, about Iran. It is pales in comparison. Let me rephrase that again, guys. Think about it again. If you take every claim they ever made about Iran, true or not, pretend it's true, compare it to just what you can prove, just Israel, just the United States has done in its history, it pales in comparison. And yet, they're the evil boogeyman with all the U.S. bases surrounding it taking over the world, apparently. Painful.
Foothold of Iran. That's not spoken about enough. Iran, its IRGC, and even Hezbollah has a presence in South America, and one of their anchor presence, especially for the Iranians, is inside of Venezuela. So we just finished talking about Iran and the hostility it has towards the United States, where they have planted
the government, not you, and they made that very clear over the years. It's weird actually. Iranians in general are very, very nice to American people. Over the years, any moment these things could evolve and change, but I've done many reports on this, and it's actually pretty commonly known that Iranians are very fond of Americans. The government, however, is quite different. You see, because outside of this broken, propagandized, government-controlled area, everyone around the world knows what the U.S. government has done, has continued to do to other countries, regime changes, stealing things. They know this. And so they recognize what the real threat is, especially when they look at content like this and they go, look, plenty of Americans are very clear about what their government is. It's not hard to see. And people like Marco Rubio are worried they're going to end up in a jail cell sooner than they might like.
Their flag in our hemisphere is on Venezuelan territory with the full and open cooperation of that regime. So the fact that Maduro feels threatened by the presence of U.S. assets in the region and a counter-drug mission, it proves that he's into the drug business.
Oh, yeah. So you surrounding his country with warships proves that he's guilty? What a stupid argument. This is how dumb that they think we are. And they're wrong. And I think history's showing that. John says it's genuinely embarrassing to watch the U.S. attempt to rationalize a potential war with Venezuela by tying it to Iran, which is really tying it to Israel. When in doubt, they invoke Israel's enemies to justify their nonsense. Another example of the toxic special relationship. See? People get it. Daniel Adams, Rubio may even be worse than Bolton, who, though evil, was at least smart. Trump cannot seem to disconnect himself from the neocon rot that has dominated U.S. policy for at least the last 40 years, and apparently the dumbest ones in the room. Now, here's Trump telling you that we may go to war soon. Now, realize, in earnest, this is war. Any act of war is war, regardless of whether it's declared by Congress, because the Congress hasn't declared war since World War II, as far as I can tell. So there's been war a lot since then, right? So this is just them controlling the narrative. But they're conducting war against Venezuela. What he's saying is there may be troops deployed on the ground. And let's be real. I'm willing to bet you that's already happened. I'm willing to bet you that there's been mercenary types that have been trying to do CIA, operative, like intelligence operations for decades in these countries. You can prove that, in fact. So this is just the extension of that. But I want you to think about this as the so-called peace president. Why would we argue that invasion of Venezuela suits any American interest? Even if you take the drug claim at face value, which is not true. We're going to go to war for that? How about we just stop, how about we just, okay, you're talking about boats coming in and bringing drugs. Couldn't you just actually be America first and actually, tighten up security in that way? Don't go abroad looking for warrior or looking for monsters, but you can actually just defend our country like the founding fathers actually envisioned. No. He wants to go to war in Venezuela because Israel wants that. So America first. Shut up.
Stopped every boat we knock out. We save 25,000 American lives.
Right. So in my opinion, this is Trump just reciting what he heard from people around him. This is simply not true. And it's pretty embarrassing that he thinks anyone takes this seriously, other than the people that blindly support him.
Every boat we knock out, we save 25,000 American lives. Right. The drugs coming in through sea are down 91%. I'm surprised there's 9%. You want to, but
91%. Well, I mean, look, probably. I mean, it's the idea, first of all, why we ever trust what they say. ICE violence is up 1,000%. No, it's really not. You absolutely lied about that. Or you lied about every other example of why you did what you did with ICE, why you arrested that person, why you shot at them. They keep getting caught lying. Or them. How about MS-13? How about Garcia? How about Khalil? They lie and they lie and they lie. It's very obvious. So why would we go, oh, okay, 90%? Probably not, to be honest. But even if it was, it's kind of the same point about military. If you're just going to start bombing every boat that comes near, then probably going to happen. Doesn't mean it's going to continue to be the case when you stop illegally bombing ships. But either way, even if it's actually what happened, what they're doing is a crime. There's just no air in the conversation, guys. What they're doing is a crime, and all it's going to do is start the justification for any other country to bomb whatever boat it wants under whatever guise it wants because they're doing the same thing.
It's down 91, and we're going to start very soon on land, and I'm sure you're thrilled to hear that.
So right. War on land. Now, he probably just said that, to be honest, just to make things go crazy and flood the zone. I actually find it kind of hard to believe that they would do that because of every other claim they've made. That's my feeling. I feel like that's not actually going to be the way this goes. But maybe that's what Israel wants, and we'll be able to tell for sure which one, which agenda weighs out. Probably Israel.
Mr. President, in the boat strikes, if it is found that survivors were actually killed while clinging onto that boat, should Secretary...
Which they were, by the way. This is after that.
Hegseth, Admiral Bradley, or others be punished?
I think you're going to find that this is war, that these people were killing our people.
What? They've taken this to a cartoonish level, guys. Now we're at war, and they're literally talking about drugs maybe going to the United States and then maybe being used and then maybe killing somebody, and that's them at war with us. Never will this hold up in any court other than people that are blindly adherent to politics, which does exist. But this is impossible. I don't know why he actually thinks this makes sense. I don't know. Maybe he's just this blind. I don't think so. I think this is for the interest of one thing. And we've seen that he's willing to make himself look this stupid for only one thing.
By the millions, actually, if you look over a few years. I think
Should Secretary Hegseth, Admiral Bradley, or others be punished?
I think you're going to find that this is war, that these people were killing our people by the millions, actually, if you look over a few years. I think you're going to
As if every drug comes from Venezuela, let alone these boats. And that's, remember, 70,000 overdoses. That's it.
find that there's a very receptive ear to doing exactly what they're doing, taking out those boats. And
they're doing. Don't you love how he tries to make it sound like he's just I'm just an observer. I don't know whatever they're doing. It's him. People support what they're doing. What you're doing, man. You are the one making this happen as the leader. That's the reality. Whether you ordered it or not, you're in charge. It's your responsibility. Or that's what real leaders act like and think. But recognize what he's saying. People support it. That's not true, guys. It's clear pretty much around that there's a strong support in the blind supporting base. But even the people that may go, yeah, I agree with this, are going, but it's illegal. So let's have a conversation. Let's make this legal. And then we can, but they're not doing that. They're just going to keep doing it anyway. So what you're saying is we're okay with breaking the law if we like the way he's doing it. These are children.
very soon we're going to start doing it on land too, because we know every route, we know every house, we know where they manufacture this crap.
Oh, great. So now we're going to have them bombing locations in Venezuela, and we're going to pretend like it's not about bombing drugs, even though we can prove that's not what's happening? How long until we just go, oh, yeah, we're just at war for Israel in Venezuela? We know where they put it all together. And I think you're going to see it very soon on land also. Yeah, please. I think now you could one of two ways. Now, I originally took this as on land, deployment, but he could just very well be talking about just bombing from the air on land, which then he would argue that we're just conducting the same operation and it wouldn't be boots on the ground, even though it's, essentially the same thing. Might be his thinking, he thinks this is his, crafty way of avoiding that.
To be clear, you support the decision to kill survivors after the
No, I support the decision to knock out the boats.
See, he's careful because he knows that's a crime. And everyone's talking about that's a war crime. So he knows. So he just threw Hegseth under the bus. Because if he wants to support it as a leader, he would say, I support their actions. He did not. He shucked it onto them.
To be clear, you support the decision to kill survivors after the
No, I support the decision to knock out the boats. And whoever is piloting those boats, most of them are gone. But
coward. So you basically just said, no, I don't support them killing those innocent people, or rather the people that survived.
Whoever are piloting those boats, they're guilty of trying to kill people in our country.
No, they're not. They're just not. That's the dumbest statement he's made so far.
Please.
The House Judiciary Committee.
Wow. That's just so over the top, guys. So, U.S. military documents, according to The Intercept, show plans to keep troops in the Caribbean through 2028. Yeah, totally about drugs, though. It's pathetic how clear this is. As Catherine from Solari Report points out, still waiting to hear Hegseth. Oh, he posted this ridiculous cartoon. Like, they're just trying to double down. Like, they think that makes them strong. It's weakness. He says, for Christmas wish list, he posted Franklin the Turtle bombing in his boats full of drugs in the Caribbean. Like, that's bad. That's tasteless, guys. Do whatever you want. Right? I'm not going to say you can't post whatever cartoon meme you want. Freedom of speech, do what you want. But it has no, there's another word I'm looking for. It's you're using something that is to some people, there's something that's a loved children's character, and you're using it to make a joke out of your very clear war crimes. I mean, guys, it's tone deaf. It's tasteless, and he doesn't care because he thinks he's supported. He'll find out very quickly he's not as soon as it's in Trump's interest. Still waiting to hear Hegseth address $20 trillion missing from DOD, Catherine writes. Why DOD allows drugs to come in across the border and built the heroin industry in Afghanistan, right? And why DOD engineered Operation Warp Speed and has killed and disabled millions of Americans, including children like Franklin. Of course, he won't get into any of that because they're not really here to do anything for you, guys. All those things would happen if they were actually America first. Caitlin Johnstone simply says if Maduro was really a monstrous, tyrannical dictator, the U.S. would be selling him F-35s. Well put. Because exactly the point, guys. Mohammed Salman's not a dictator. I mean, come on. It's insulting to your intelligence. Now, I'm gonna leave these for another conversation. We will go into it. I've already generally made these points. And it's not necessary for today. I think it's better to leave it there. But the point was about the Sudan, which we've covered a lot in the past, and about what's continuing to happen, and just understanding that Israel's involved, and it has been from the very beginning. This is from 2004. Sudan accuses Israel and Germany of involvement in the Darfur conflict, which is in the Sudan. Gaddafi from Libya was the one that called out Israel and said it's Israel, not Bashar, behind the war in Sudan. How RSF is adopting Israel's template for genocide, right? From Khartoum to Tel Aviv, Israel's fingerprints in the Sudan's genocide from 21st Century Wire. All this stuff is so damn clear, guys. We've talked about this. This is from the U.S.-Israeli hand in Sudan's horrifying civil war, April 22nd, 2024. And the point in this is simply to highlight, just show you this quickly, that the U.S. government it simply says that the government has been arming the groups. For the U.S. government, when it comes to the agenda in West Asia, it is clear that its values above all, asserting Israeli regional hegemony, which is why both the Trump and Biden administrations have placed normalization deals across the area. Combined with a desire for Israeli dominance, it has the potential for securing U.S.-Israel control over the Sudan's lucrative gold mines, which are in the hands of Hamedi, who is RSF support, in addition to gaining foothold in the Sahel, Red Sea, and Suez Canal spheres of influence. The U.S.-Israeli alliance is interested in resources, normalization, and manpower for foreign wars and geostrategic supremacy in a key region of the area. I think it was up here. I just want to give you that one part, which was, where was it? Yeah, like I said, I'll go into it in the future. I just want to give you this quick part, but it was simply, when de facto Sudanese leader and head of the military ordered strikes on positions associated with the Rapid Support Forces led by Hamedi, triggering the ongoing conflict in Sudan, the U.S. threw its hands up in the air and Western media attempted to blame Russia's Wagner Group. The RFS were originally set up under the banner of the infamous Jan Jaweed and deposed of Sudanese dictator Omar Bashir. It is important to note that although Bashir was overthrown during the 2019 revolution in Sudan, he was able to maintain his brutal rule for 3 decades prior, when the U.S. government only choosing to give focus to the democracy recently, but not for the sake of aiding democracy. Point is that they've supported people in many different locations and many different sides as long as they're amenable to their goals. And the moment even a dictator supporting in the past, they stopped doing that, they put someone else in power, and they have been abusing the situation for decades. Okay? It's very, very, very clear. We also have the reality that Trump's now signing deals to basically steal from the Congo. Here, I'll just play this sentence right here.
These people are criminals.
Oh, wait. That's not it. Hold on. I got one more. Where was that? Here it is. Shoot, which one was that? It was the Clash report. I guess I didn't download it. That's strange. Here, I'll just grab it real quick since we're talking about it. But it's just interesting because Trump says it out loud. And we'll just kind of end on this. It's a clear point about making money off the exploitation of resources. Now, I've made the point a long time about, for example, China making deals, which I argue are clearly in their benefit and probably at the expense of the local area, but that are still taken because it's still, there's some benefit to them. Whereas in the alternative we've seen is the U.S. government comes in and just steals what they want and just destroys the area. And so my point was simply that despite being in the interest of China, you can clearly see that in some cases that's just better opportunity. And so in this case, you got Trump now making deals with them. So you could argue the same thing, right? Except the difference is these are locations that have been like made unstable and people put in places that are willing to take the deals that as opposed to making some kind of agreement with a foreign power. This is them in the same way manipulating the situation into being.
The United States is also signing our own bilateral agreements with the Congo and Rwanda that will unlock new opportunities for the United States to access critical minerals and provide economic benefits for everybody.
And that's not what's going to happen. I hope I'm wrong. History shows you otherwise. They're going to take and take and take and keep the country in chaos, destabilized, so they can take what they want at will. And that's going to be rare earth minerals and whatever else they can get. And that's why they've kept these places in destabilization. Congo, Haiti, all of it.
And we'll be involved with sending some of our biggest and greatest companies over to
great.
the two
Profiteering.
countries.
Great. Fascism, right? corporate government overlap, just like Iraq. Did that benefit Iraq? No, it did not.
And we're going to take out some of the rare earth and take out some of the assets and pay, and everybody's going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, cool, because that's what we all want, right? How about the people in Congo? Will they make a lot of money? Will the people of Congo make money? Because you're destroying their country to get it. I doubt it. Rwanda and Democratic Republic of Congo, right? Well, let's not forget. Oh, I didn't include it. The Rwanda genocide too, right? So Israel was involved with Rwanda. So many other ways, so too the United States. You can watch this. It's not debatable. It's very clear. They literally armed them, gave them Uzis and all sorts of stuff, machetes, and stoked the divisions between the two. It's very public, by the way. But now you have them exploiting other countries. It says, we all know who everybody here is, and it's not the people of Congo, as Menchosit points. Trump secretly eased sanctions on Israeli billionaire in the Congo. Now, we did a whole report on the blood diamond conversation. Let me see if this comes up. In regard to Congo, specifically. And it's actually wild to me. Yeah, look at this. You should check this if you haven't seen this show out. This is wild. Haiti chaos also overlaps. Israel's blood diamonds in Congo. Apparently, they have like the largest market, and it comes directly from this blood diamond location in Congo where they're using children labor and everything, and everybody in the world knows this, and nobody does anything about it. How typical, right? And so now they're just making more deals for the same reason, and Menchosit's making the same point. We already know what this is about. And we'll talk about Minnesota and Somalians and the lie around this because they want that state like other conversations or however you read this. And again, the same point is it's 1%, guys. It's 1.1 now because it went up a little bit, but 1% of the population. And they really want you to think that this is going crazy and they're going to take over everything. That's what he's saying in all these clips, saying that Somalia is just a disgusting country that has no benefit and they just kill each other and fight. Like, this is the same kind of dehumanization they've done about everybody else that they want to abuse. And the truth is, like all the rest of them, that they have been manipulating this location and a lot of other places for quite a long time. U.S. bombed Somalia for the 102nd time just this year. It's just painful. And of course, right when this all starts, Elon Musk goes, ISIS, Somalia. Oh, right. Like while you're working with these people and supporting them in Syria, right? As I simply said, are we really doing this again? There's just no way to disregard at this point that Elon is simply playing a role as these government agendas in these. No, Elon, ISIS is what you guys support in Syria. ISIS is what you guys support in the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. ISIS is what you've always protected. They're simply just trying to create the people that they don't like as the enemy so they can use it like they always have. It's not hard to see. And Liam Cosgrove in this clip, I'll just play this one actually, and then we'll end.
U.S. troops into fortified caves in Somalia to kill like 5 guys. And I think it's a good question as to why the U.S. military is still in Somalia.
Thank you for the question. So I can assure you, right, this is an America First Department of War and president. So we aren't conducting forever wars in Somalia. We're not seeking regime change, we're not.
No, to me, it sounds like she said we are. I think she meant to say aren't. That's how it was taken. But listen to that again. I played this before, but she's simply just going, it's the same woman with the same platitude. So why? Oh, don't worry. We're doing good stuff and we're fighting for freedom and we don't do regime change. That's her answer. Like placating like your 5-year-old, right? Obviously, we know that's not true. Maybe she even believes it. But listen, it feels like she says they are doing it.
Thank you for the question. So I can assure you, right, this is an America First Department of War.
Incorrect.
And president. So we aren't conducting forever wars in Somalia. We're not.
She said aren't. I think it was close.
Seeking regime change, we're not nation building. But I will say that this department's narrowly scoped, intelligence-driven counterterrorism operation in places like Somalia,
102 times this year,
alongside our partners, allow us to
Israel
to protect the American homeland from terrorist threats and to protect our interests. So
I'd love to see any of those. When's the last time there was a threat? You claim a lot of stuff. FBI loves to make things up. When's the last time there was anything? Now they'll go, because we stopped them. No, you don't. That's not what's happening. There is not a real credible example of that I've seen in a very long time. They love to push this. And what we do see are because of what they're doing around the world. If you understand, and actually I'll play one thing on the way out. Why not? Since we talked about Zionism today, understand where it really comes from. Zionism is the birth of terrorism.
We will continue to make sure that the American people are kept safe. That's our utmost priority. But, we're not isolationists. We're also not neocons. We're realists. We understand.
Buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. We're not the buzzwords.
That threats face the American people every single day. We take that incredibly seriously. But at the same time, we're always going to make sure that we're putting America first.
Cool. Thank you for not answering the question, right? There we go. That's weird. The button wasn't working. That's weird. Anyway, it's just so tiresome to deal with these people. She's clearly put there because she's given these basic retort, like it's just this broad, we're America first, and we're not regime change, and we're doing it for good things. Well, what about the question that I asked about? It didn't even pretend to engage with the information because it's just lazy, broad things. And then they post that on Nick's Order channel and go, oh, boom, shut him down. It's just, we live in this gaslit astroturf world right now. And I believe that more people than ever are starting to fall away from it. I really do. So hopefully this has opened some minds. Now I'm going to play this clip because it's important to understand this. And then I'll play a song on the way out, actually.
The Zionists have used it and brought it, in fact, to the area. Terrorism, as we know it today, the planting of bombs in marketplaces and so on and so forth, was, in fact, introduced into the Middle East by the Zionists in the 1920s. But the net result of Zionist terrorism and violence in the first third of the 20th century has brought forth, to my mind, the anomaly, the horrific and unacceptable status in the Middle East today of the State of Israel, which is in fact an armed garrison state, which now exports more arms and distributes violence all around the world, vastly disproportionate to its size. I mean, in that respect, I think it's a horrible cycle of violence. But in it all, I think the Palestinian is the victim. There's no question about that.
Important for us to finally come to terms with a lot of the things we've broken down today. But thank you for tuning in today. I'll leave you with a song that I wrote that you've heard before, but I just felt like grabbing it today because it's, it's good to keep these things. It's the idea is about the larger picture. It's called Money Game. Most of you probably seen or heard before, but I just felt like grabbing it. We'll play that on the way out today, but it really does the message, right? Is that it's obviously, I wrote that when my mindset was, I even then didn't think it was only about money, but it's so obvious what a driving factor that is, that when we really stand back and realize at the most obvious level, they don't care about freedom or democracy or fighting for American interests. They care about money or assets or control or geostrategic, and they care about controlling the lives around them. That's what psychopaths and sociopaths are all about, because at some level they realize what they would do to people when they're in control. And so they need to be in control so that won't happen to them. Now, that's actually a pretty commonly psychological point that's discussed around sociopaths and psychopaths, largely sociopathy, people that can more so function within society. And I've always said this over the years, if you take the percentage, generally speaking, of sociopathy that exists in society, or let's just say the United States, there's a percentage. It fluctuates. If you take that percentage and you compare it to what generally is the percentage of Americans involved in government, you'll find that it's damn near identical. I'm not making that up. I think there's a reason for that. I think we all know why, because they gravitate towards those positions like, I don't like a weird point. People in positions of power or positions of, or people that are, malicious or sinister or sexually, like a sexual predator, they will find their way into positions where it gains them access to what they want. And powerful people, what they want is control of everybody else. Very clear. So I'll leave you with this song that kind of talks about that idea. I think the video is from a COVID-19 perspective, but clearly it's relevant to where we are. So thank you for tuning in today, guys. Please share the information. Talk about this, make clips, tag me. I'll share those. We do this for free every time we put this out for free on every platform, because it's important that people see this, that you get access to the source material. You can talk about it. You can vet it. You can disagree with me. If you find value in what we're doing, there's plenty of ways to donate and support the platform. Let us know what it means to you. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
I
I see all the people led into deception by the very men bound to care, blinded by the promises, unknowingly sold despair. So leave your herd of sheep and follow this shepherd to revolutionary ends. The world that you knew has changed around you. It's all become a money game. It's all become a money game. It's all become a money game. Are you ready for? Are you ready for? Are you ready for revolution? Revolution. The revolution's now. It's happening all around you. If you cannot see, pull aside the curtain and see the war machine. It's time for you to rise up and prepare. So arm your fellow man, 'cause it's become destructive to its own ends. The world that you knew has changed around you. It's all become a money game. It's all become a money game. It's all become a money game. Are you ready for? Are you ready for? Are you ready for revolution? Revolution. The revolution's now. It's happening all around you. If you cannot see, pull aside the curtain and see the war machine. It's time for you to rise up and prepare. So arm your fellow man, 'cause it's become destructive to its own ends. The world that you knew has changed around you. It's all become a money game. It's all become a money game. It's all become a money game. Are you ready for? Are you ready for? Are you ready for the revolution? The revolution. The revolution's now. It's happening all around you. If you cannot see, pull aside the curtain and see the war machine. It's time for you to rise up and prepare. So arm your fellow man, 'cause they've become destructive to their own ends. The world that you knew has changed around you. It's all become a money game. It's all become a money game. It's all become a money game. Are they ready for? Are they ready?